There is a dream that military hardware designers have chased throughout history. It is one that often cracks open the door to reality, just barely, teasing the hopeful and the delusional towards its lair, where decades of investment await, often to only find the dream has warped into a nightmare. What is this dream? It is to have the total package. In this case, it is to have a weapon system, in whatever realm it may be, from armored fighting vehicles to multi-role space and aircraft, to infantry weapons, that can encompass multiple tasks, and do them all well. And best of all, it is to do them at an affordable cost. When the tragic reality hits these designers, though, these grand ambitions are almost always never met by the dreamer's means. Either the needs aren't met by these jack-of-all-trades super machines, or their costs spiral out of control, or they simply never fulfill their intended purposes. But the idea, in essence, is not without merit. It is their role to peer towards the virtues of perfection and simply never reach it themselves. With these desires in the hearts and minds of generations of military scientists and engineers, this concept was bound to appear in its full glory sooner or later. In the depths of the Kerensky cluster, in the midst of what was supposed to be the clan's golden century, one such creation was made manifest. Like with so many other Battlemech designs, it owed its true origin to the military-industrial complex of the Star League. It was here, though, that the concept was brought forward, and simply because it was finally possible. Sometimes, the trap of multi-role devices can be avoided by advances made in technology, know-how, and logistics. What emerged from this process was a Battlemech that flew from its lair like a great phoenix, and loomed over the world, if only for a few beautiful moments, before it was cast into the shadows to linger as a half-forgotten, failed, backwards misstep. And here it lurked for almost 200 years, before it was able to spread its steel wings once more, and become the machine it was always destined to be. Even if its place at such heights may not have gone unchallenged in the fierce fighting that evolved out of the Inner Sphere in the 31st and 32nd centuries. In this overview, we are going to examine one of the greatest technological marvels to come from the clans, prior to the implementation of the Omnimech. We are going to explore the entirety of its origin and history, as well as the circumstances around those who crafted it in the first place. And we are going to explore their eventual fate as well. From the minds of the Star League scientists, to the forges of Clan Steel Viper, to the bazaars of Clan Diamond Shark, and finally, to the capable hands of Inner Sphere powers, who truly doctrinally have allowed this supposed dead end of advancement to flourish. This will be no mere survey of a bygone relic or oddity, but instead will be an unveiling of a truly phenomenal machine. It is an evolutionary exemplar of Battlemech technology, and one for all the world to see. The Phoenix Hawk IIC. Mechs fall into two general classes in the SLDF, regular army mechs and royal mechs. The mechs of the regular army are the equal or better of any battlemech in service with any member state. and the SLDF has unrestricted access to purchase any battle mech in production anywhere in the Star League. Procurement officers visit manufacturers in every member state and are feted by industrial concerns wherever they go. Standard procurement contracts for SLDF supplies are written with lifespans measured in decades. Capturing or losing a Star League procurement contract has made or broken industrial communities. Royal mechs are the pinnacle of warfighting technology, designed and built by the expert designers of the Terran hegemony. They mount equipment and weaponry unseen even on regular army mechs. Cutting-edge battle mechs such as the Exterminator, the Talon, and the most advanced variants of the Emperor make the Royal regiments and divisions the equals of 2 or 3 times their number. A part of the Star League Defense Force's description of their battlemech assets in their field manual. The Star League was the pinnacle of human cooperation across the broad expanse of the Inner Sphere and Periphery. After the Reunification Wars and the initial foundation of the League, in a new spectacular age ranging from the early 27th century until the end of the 28th century, humans lived in relative peace. In almost every area of human existence and civilization, ranging from life expectancies to standards of living to industrial and economic development, all continued on a consistent path upwards throughout this time. This astounding level of development then went on to further fuel the military-industrial complexes of the various member states in the core regions of the Star League. One of the most contradictory features of this era of stability was the enormous military buildup which took place under it. The 6 great houses were in a constant state of attempting to invigorate and build up their own militaries to defend themselves from what was typically non-threats, as every human civilization as of this time was within the Star League. The League was also a defensive alliance, to be clear. Regardless, as the member states armed themselves, the Camerons, the first among equals amidst the great houses, then expanded the budgets and privileges for the Star League Defense Forces in order to maintain the peace between their satraps. This also conveniently kept these functional vassals in their place beneath the Terran hegemony. Conveniently. All of this build-out was, as you might understand it, a contradiction that would eventually come to a head, especially as animosity and tensions grew between the member states themselves, and it also festered between those same states and the Terran hegemony-run Star League. In their rush to be the mightiest of the military powers within the League, the SLDF created vast armies of battle mechs and pressed forward with technologies and designs that would push the letter forward repeatedly in terms of what was possible in regards to these weapons of war. Fantastic and terrible creations emerged during this era, feeding into the various roles within the SLDF's divisional structures to achieve the best outcomes on the battlefield, at least in theory, as so much of the SLDF's approach to warfare was purely theory by the time these major leaps were being made. Still, these theoretically devastating and overpowering examples of human ingenuity turned to destruction were put together until the very eve of what became known as the Ameris Coup, or the Ameris Civil War. Legendary battlemechs such as the King Crab, Atlas, Crusader, Awesome, Battlemaster, Firestarter, Marauder, and refits of so many other chassis all emerged during this dash for military supremacy. Most notably of all, though, a specific machine from only days before the creation of the Star League would eventually have an important role within a vital portion of the SLDF's line regiments. To begin to understand how, let's go over the broad structure of an SLDF brigade. A battlemech SLDF brigade, which would have been made up of only mechs to be clear, is comprised of 3 regiments. Doctrinally, these regiments would be designated as one of 3 types. A heavy assault regiment is what its name indicates, in that this is a breakthrough formation mostly comprised of heavy and assault mechs. These typically also have an attached, separate artillery formation to go along with them. These are for frontal assaults, or for taking fortified positions. They go to where the fighting is going to be the heaviest, and break open enemy lines. A battle regiment is intended for a mixed force of multi-role battle mechs. The majority of these mechs in these formations were to be mediums and heavies, and they were meant to handle a broad array of situations. While not a true jack-of-all-trades as a formation in the truest sense, battle regiments are equipped to handle the largest variety of engagements and tasks. The final standard regiment type found within the SLDF brigades is the Striker formation, composed of light and medium battle mechs. This assembly of forces were specifically planned to be used in a reconnaissance role. They were also, notably, intended to exploit breakthroughs in enemy lines if possible, typically caused by the heavier battle or assault regiments that they were attached to. These Striker regiments were also given, more often than not, aerospace support attachments as well. And it is in these last regiments where a unique series of innovations and a distinct desire to change the nature of warfare began to take shape. During the build-out of the SLDF in these more peaceful times, the Stinger and Wasp became staples of every light mech force at this scale, including within the Great Houses and the SLDF. These mechs were built in massive abundance. However, regarding their effectiveness, beyond the virtue of their raw numbers, they could leave something to be desired. The Stinger and Wasp, for instance, were not nearly as fast as a Locust. They were not nearly as heavily armed as some of their peer, heavier light mechs or mediums. And while not incompetent in the roles that they were intended for, they could be quite easily outcompeted. In essence, these mechs were fit for service due to their cost and due to their numbers, a trend that many house armies and the SLDF eagerly followed. There was a catch, though. Just prior to the birth of the Star League, Orgus Industries opted to innovate on the Stinger. They reinforced its chassis, increased its size and weight, and radically improved its armor and firepower. A new 45-ton Maverick of a mech in 2568 was brought into the world and dubbed the PXH-1 Phoenix Hawk. Unsurprisingly, the Star League would exploit this machine whenever possible in their Striker regiments, as the divisions of its armies grew over the coming centuries. The Phoenix Hawk moved with the same grace and speed of its lighter siblings. It carried heavier firepower, and, of course, it was more heavily armored for the most part as well. The mech became the standard for which all other recon and striker mechs were measured against, and became commonly a command vehicle in lighter formations within the SLDF, in particular leading Wasps and Stingers. New variants of the mech were built up over time, adding in new technologies and keeping the machines in service as centuries passed within human space. The PXH series was just too valuable and reliable to discard, even without active wars raging across the inner sphere. This is where the story ends for most people regarding this mech. Its service continued for centuries, and it remained an icon for mech warriors for generations yet further. But in the SLDF, there was a sense that striker formations were underserved in comparison to their battle and assault counterparts. And during the golden years of the Star League, innovation and plans began to be made. Experiments were being run to improve the weight, firepower, and agility of heavier mechs so that they could more easily fit within the recon role that traditionally light and medium mechs occupied. Because if this could happen, it could expand the usefulness and general operational capabilities of brigades across the SLDF, once more helping it maintain its lead, its edge if you will, over their Great House counterparts. The first major attempt to make this a reality was launched in 2665, and it took on the form of the ignoble and often reviled CGR-1A1 Charger. An 80-ton battle mech built by Wells Technologies. Using mostly introductory tech, this brick-shaped assault could reach a maximum speed of 86 kilometers per hour, making it a true heavy recon asset. It just happened to lack armor and anything resembling firepower. Despite the mockery this mech received, over 1,000 were built for the SLDF, because there was a desire for a heavy recon unit like this mech to fulfill a new combat role inside of their regiments. The Kuritan company attempted to feed this appetite and mostly failed in their ambitions. In all likelihood, the Charger was some form of grift operation on behalf of its developers even, given the extremely low-tech, high-cost asset that it was. Internally, within the SLDF though, in spite of this abominable first attempt, their engineers began trying to tackle the idea of a heavy recon asset at some point after the introduction of the much-maligned Charger. Much as Orgus itself had expanded and hardened the Stinger's frame to build the Phoenix Hawk, these designers and innovators planned to do so again. To show how closely they intended to follow the blueprints of their forebears, these SLDF designers intended to double the size of the Phoenix Hawk, much as Orgus had doubled the size of the Stinger to create it in the first place. These developers clearly wanted to leverage advanced technologies in what they were planning. This meant components not used within the primitive Combine-built Charger. In doing so, they would maximize the new mech's effectiveness. This radical take on the classic Phoenix Hawk, though, never made it past conceptual or early development seemingly. If it was completed on the drawing board, or even less likely, the prototype stages, before the project was ended. As of now, it's not fully understood as to why this project died at some point prior to the collapse of the Terran hegemony. Speculatively, it could have been the cost and fragility of a massive Star League-era 400XL engine, which also might have made the mech's desired reliability and durability for its size less meaningful. It could have been that its enhanced firepower, in whatever configuration that took, simply didn't justify the enormous cost for an advanced machine such as this. Or, dare I say, it could have been due to the limitations of Star League technologies of the time. Just to give a few examples, one could point to their relatively cumbersome endosteel components, XL engines, cooling systems, and the absurd cost associated with such technologies. This all could have simply made the mech unappealing, especially given that it would have been in a reconnaissance role, something that would have put this asset in constant jeopardy. Some items, and hopefully not personnel, are meant to be attritable in warfare. Just because such a mech could have been made, didn't mean it should have been made. Often, the Star League didn't get this memo in terms of its procurement, ironically. This is also to say nothing of potential problems with expanding the Phoenix Hawk itself to such an almost absurd size. Was the frame even going to work at this scale, with how it was redesigned? What teething problems might have it experienced? Whatever the case may be, this fantastical vision for an 80-ton heavy recon asset to supplant mechs like the Charger in the heavy recon role, based on upgrading the Phoenix Hawk, in whatever form that would have taken, never materialized. Military officers and theorists who wanted the mech never received it. Engineers and scientists who pushed for it themselves, and tried to make it a reality, failed to bring it into the world. At some point, after this failed attempt to build a better, more well-rounded, durable, and offensive recon and breakthrough asset, everything fell apart. The Terran hegemony was destroyed, first by Stefan Amaris, and then later it was further destroyed by the SLDF in their campaign to uproot and justly punish the usurper, as well as his regime. This crash was apocalyptic for the Inner Sphere. Economies shuttered. Militaries went on high alert. Old grievances could finally be settled, and shortly afterwards, the first of the catastrophic succession wars began. The knowledge and military secrets of the SLDF were destroyed in a blaze of nuclear fire and petty destruction. Or, at least, that was what was thought. Some secrets remained in hidden caches or military research facilities that were abandoned in the wake of the collapse, only to be rediscovered by the Inner Sphere after this horrendous Dark Age. Furthermore, other archives of knowledge were hoarded by Comstar, the shadowy corporation and rulers of Terra, in the wake of the hegemony's disappearance. But these were not the only places to retain the lost technology of the Star League. General Alexander Kerensky, the last protector of the Star League, rallied and organized the lion's share of the SLDF, veterans of the Ameris Civil War, as well as hordes of the League's best minds, including the very scientists who either worked on or stewarded 1,000 projects and vital technologies in civilian and military sectors, before taking them on a massed exodus into the great beyond, past the Inner Sphere and known space, beyond the Periphery. They were to leave in order to not participate in the horrors of what was being unleashed in the wake of the fall of the League. With them, they didn't just bring their know-how directly, but vast archives of research, materials, and knowledge. And sadly, they brought the divisions that had almost destroyed the Inner Sphere they had just fled from as well. But in the flames that followed these exiles, there was rebirth.
Nicholas is the only answer. He may not have the seasoning of age, and he has an air about him that makes many people uncomfortable. But he is a division commander. He is something that no one else does. The Kerensky name. In this time and place, what the soldiers and people of this new Star League need is consistency. Nicholas shares the same vision as his father, only filtered through the lens of someone who grew up in the hell that was life on Terra under Ameris. Who better then to lead us into the future and ensure we don't fall prey to the same mistakes? Lieutenant General Antonius Zalman. Personal Journals. 1 September 2801.
The self-imposed exodus of the Star League Defense Forces, their families, and the assortment of colonial engineers and high-profile scientists and civilians that Kerensky could take with him, went on a journey which was filled with uncertainty, and eventually it was filled with dread, rather than the hopeful vision that it started with. De Chavier, Kerensky's second-in-command and long-standing friend, was his right hand in the opening stages as they made their journey through space. The pair rightly spoke about how those in the Inner Sphere were in the squalor of an era of decline, destruction, and hatred, what Kerensky dubbed his Forever War. But their belief was that the people that were now going to what became the Pentagon Worlds were somehow different than those they left behind. For the most part, it turned out that was a fantasy, because these chosen peoples of Kerensky began falling upon one another, even before arriving at their final destination. There was the Prinz Eugen Revolt. Then, worse, after finding the Pentagon Worlds and beginning to settle, rapidly old grievances, ones which lay dormant in the now far-away safe haven for mankind, ruptured. Loyalties to people's origins took root, and approximate replicas of the old power structures of the Inner Sphere seized enclaves and worlds. It then devolved into the Pentagon Wars. During this, de Chavier was killed, and shortly afterwards, Kerensky, tired, old, and broken, passed away himself, but not before embracing his son, Nicholas Kerensky, as his successor. Nicholas Kerensky, the man who would create the clans, displayed extremely problematic personality traits throughout his life up until this point. As if things couldn't get worse, He had also developed his own quasi-ideological vision for life, one which revolved around the survival of the fittest, eugenics, and a warrior culture which would, through intimidation in institutions, dominate his new caste-based society. It was to be a civilization without family, and one that preached peace, of sorts, but practiced banal cruelty in a way most residents of human empires would have been shocked by. Even the totalitarian regimes of the Inner Sphere, the Great Houses, would later observe the scale of cruelty the clans inflicted on everyday people, and they had a sense of shock observing it. Still, to get this tragedy in motion, Kerensky took his loyalists to Stranomekti, away from the Pentagon Worlds. Reshoring and rebuilding his power base, he then formed his clans properly, before annihilating the warlords of the Pentagon Worlds that had resisted his attempts to dominate them. The total number of clans that he forged in this process was 20, though 2 of which were destroyed quite early on in the form of Clan Wolverine, which had been scapegoated by other clans for their own shortcomings, and which had acted as an excellent example for Kerensky to keep the other clans in line for those who deviated too far from his path. And then later, Clan Widowmaker. In the case of the Widowmakers, not only had their subterfuge, which was very unclan-like, gotten them in trouble, but after this discovery, their new Khan accidentally killed Nicholas Kerensky during a trial of absorption, which his clan looked poised to lose. Unsurprisingly, the rest of the clans were not particularly keen on their founder and quasi-cult leader being killed, and the Widowmakers are remembered very poorly as a result. Both were grim reminders for the clans, with the former even becoming the Unnamed Clan. Nicholas's brutal and vicious empire, and sadly his cult of personality, survived him. In the latter part of his life and shortly after his death, what would come to be known as the Kerensky Cluster was colonized. The Pentagon Worlds were subdued, but there was another clan that almost joined the ranks of the unspoken and destroyed clans of old. And it is one with an infamous legacy indeed. Interestingly, it was also this clan that brought with it a concept that had seemingly been lost to time in the crash of the Star League. Clan Steel Viper, named for the notoriously venomous Arcadian Viper, were almost amongst the few traitorous and doomed clans of the early histories. Perhaps if they had been, the clans themselves would have avoided the greatest calamity in their shared history. Sadly, history doesn't allow for do-overs. The honor of being the first and true founder of this clan fell to one Khan Eli Kinnison, as well as her Sakan Antonius Zalman. Kerensky himself seemed to have originally wanted Zalman in the role of Khan instead of Sakan, but the elder general, one who had served quite well in the SLDF under his father, urged the founder of the clan to consider the younger Kinnison for the role. Zalman, historically, is typically honored as the founder of the clan in terms of his virtues and spirit, due to the shame that Kinnison brought upon herself and almost upon the clan. His reign as Sakan was short, numbering only a handful of years. Eli Kinnison's contributions, beyond nearly getting the clan destroyed in her own ambitions to become the lover of Ilkhan Nicholas Kerensky, were still significant. She integrated captured populations at a fast rate from the conquest of the Pentagon Worlds, including being able to adapt captured soldiers into her command structure with a degree of fluidity. She was also able to enforce a rapid adoption of the clan's way of warfare. Additionally, it is noted that the Steel Vipers, after being fully established and in the aftermath of the Pentagon Worlds, developed some of the consistently best warriors due to her training methods, though these had the downside of unfortunately washing out a far higher number of recruits than other clans. Kinnison was killed by her Sakan in a staged ambush on her part, where she had attempted to murder Jessica Winson, the wife of Nicholas Kerensky. Sakan Stephen Breen's actions in killing his own leader to save the founder's wife prevented further retribution towards the Steel Vipers, at least officially. He was elevated as a result as well, becoming a noble figure for the clan to emulate, according to Kerensky, and shortly thereafter was declared Khan of the clan. Other clans may have had a slightly different opinion than their founder though, as after the incident, they were outraged by the Steel Vipers' moral failings. They launched a large number of trials against the Vipers in the immediate aftermath, but the Steel Snake managed to survive such wounds to its honor and to its assets. Kinnison became unspoken for her crimes, and her blood name was reaved by Nicholas for her treachery. This was a valuable lesson to the Steel Vipers, even. Those who were impure in mind and action, even from within, must be removed. Or at least, that is a lesson the Vipers would be quick to remember if necessary. It seems inconceivable that everything we have accomplished can be threatened by the actions of individuals within our highest ranks. Khan Kinnison acted against everything the clans represented, and all we strive to achieve. It is just such aberrations that clan society will prevent and control. Fortunately, the Steel Viper ranks also produced an individual capable of seeing and believing in the evil harbored in another's heart, and who acted selflessly to dispense proper justice to such a traitor. Count yourselves fortunate, Steel Vipers, that your clan survives by virtue of a pure majority. I nominate Sakan Breen as Khan of Clan Steel Viper. As your Ilkhan, I claim the right to strike the name Kinnison forever from all records past and present. The tainted genes of that accursed line shall be cast out and destroyed as well. Nicholas Kerensky, addressing Clan Steel Viper, sometime in the aftermath of Kinnison's attempt on Jessica Winston's life. Unfortunately for the Vipers, this was not the beginning of some grand resurrection of their fortunes. This event broke Clan Steel Viper in spirit, despite their broad innocence. In the aftermath of their founder's death, and following in the wake of the Ilkhan's death, which came only a few short years later, Clan Steel Viper attempted to test their mettle wherever possible. They're trying to wash away the stigma they had acquired in all the raids and battles that followed. Stephen Breen led the clan to multiple victories against their detractors, and thus proved their military prowess, indicating the virtues in their continued survival, according to the ways of the clans. The clan's warriors were urged to intensify their training yet further, to hone their skills to such an extent that the Steel Vipers were to have no equal. They, Clan Steel Viper, were the home of the ultimate warriors, in their own eyes. But this obsession within the warrior caste left a void, and one which the rulers of the clan's society could easily recognize. Laborers, technicians, merchants, and most importantly, scientists, fell into abject neglect. And this began happening during what was otherwise considered the golden age of the clans in general. This complete lack of direction and guidance throughout their society meant that scientists could not focus their research effectively, merchants could not form stable trading relationships with their peers, and technicians didn't know what materials or technologies they might be asked to use, or to do without, while other clans were making leaps in technology, or even what passes for culture amongst the clans. At a rate not seen since the beginning of the Star League, the Steel Vipers simply languished in their obsession, and misdirected their clan's resources for decades. Several Khans went through their rule, each being elected to help right the clan's course. but this process just led to disappointment after disappointment. The clan had no permanent alternative ideology, no permanent task, and no broad guidance, as it was repeatedly dragged off course. The Khanship became a vehicle only for the private agendas of whichever Khan proved themselves the strongest at the time of their rise to power. Even other clans viewed this state with absolute derision, as the Vipers became unreliable in almost every facet. No one could ally themselves with the Vipers, for any reason, and certainly not for any period of time, with them in this state. It even earned them the nickname the Rubber Vipers across the Kerensky cluster. From 2825 to 2860, they most definitely lived up to their nickname. And it was near the tail end of this disastrous era for the Steel Vipers that despite the shortcomings of their society, and regardless of their complete lack of guidance, that a scientist and technician caste still managed to pull together the resources to produce a new war machine intended to be the envy of the clans. This project was further encouraged by their latest Khan, Jacob Masters, who had acquired the sour reputation of allowing their scientific and technician castes to continue to reside in obscurity. This label may not have been entirely fair, given the mech he helped greenlight appears to be nothing less than a marvel. As it would happen, it'd been the Steel Viper scientists who had inherited the plans and notes regarding the SLDF's desire for an upscaled, powerful Phoenix Hawk battle mech. A limited wonder from its time, this machine, for whatever reason, was not able to be made manifest by the Star League. But to the Vipers, at the time, it clearly represented a radically different departure in concept from anything anyone else was producing. By the 2850s, even in this supposed golden century, most clan battle mechs still very much favored the design philosophies of the inner sphere that had birthed them. Heavy mechs broadly moved at the traditional rate of battle, as did their new assaults. The Warhammer 2C and Marauder 2C were key examples of this. They were brutal, heavy fighting machines that were upscaled versions of their original inner sphere counterparts, including their aforementioned rate of advance. These were more technologically advanced, but did not represent a new approach to warfare or the implementation of heavier mechs themselves. These were forerunners to the current age platforms that would shock the inner sphere 2 centuries later, even though their power and capabilities would remain impressive moving forwards, but they are in fact dinosaurs to the clans, doctrinally. While not given the credit it earned, one of the first heavier machines to break this mold did so because of Clan Steel Viper scientists and Khan masters. In 2851, they finalized and began producing a revolutionary design, in that they had achieved the dream that many SLDF striker commanders had always wanted, as the Phoenix Hawk was reborn into the Phoenix Hawk IIC. The mech almost doubled in weight, going from 45 tons to 80 tons. It maintained almost all of the original's agility. The failure of the Charger 2 was seemingly washed away by this advanced new design, proving that a true, assault-level recon and striker asset was possible with cutting-edge equipment. It leveraged every advanced clan technology available at the time as well, allowing this giant to push the very boundaries of what was possible with clan advancements, in contrast to other 2C designs from this era as a consequence, as they often didn't employ an abundance of structural options for a variety of reasons. The Viper scientists and technicians in essence threw caution to the wind when trying to make this breakout star. From having a clan chassis, to using cutting-edge endosteel and ferrofibrous, to installing the most powerful and lightweight engine of its era, the Phoenix Hawk IIC embodied a radical new approach to warfare. It could even soar through the air like its lighter sibling, letting it take to the skies as if it were an 80-ton angel, or an 80-ton demon, depending on your perspective. The mech was also very heavily gunned for its mobility and agility profile as well, even if comparatively lightly armed when facing off against mechs in the same weight category. Still, when squaring off against its counterparts, It could outrun or outgun any adversary it came across. To give an example, the Warhammer 2C offered a brutal beatdown in a straight fight in comparison, but the Phoenix Hawk IIC could keep these fighters off balance by leveraging its superior mobility to avoid enemy fire and to strike from a position of advantage. This made the mech exceptional for dueling when put in the right hands. It also, later, seems to have informed multiple clan mechs as well, machines that would emerge much later, like the Timberwolf, Gargoyle, Summoner, Warwolf, Executioner, as well as many others, all follow this mech's quick and mighty footsteps. This grand, giant Phoenix Hawk's movement profile represented the future of warfare. Fights were to happen with greater intensity and speed going forwards. In just about every way, it was a total package of an assault striker the Star League dreamt of. Nothing would change that. Until a great shift in the way wars were fought by the clans, and how they built their frontline mechs. This came a mere handful of years after the Phoenix Hawk IIC's arrival. In 2854, only 3 years after the arrival of the PXH-2C, a massive breakthrough in battle mech construction technology was achieved, upending the status quo, and it came from Clan Coyote. The clan's science cast didn't create the fastest or most powerful machines to date. Instead, they developed a new technology, Omnitech. The Kyotl, the first Omnimech, could be adapted before battle to best reflect the preferences of its pilots, as well as taking into account the environment, enemy forces, and its specific required role in an upcoming battle or operation. This technology spread through the clan homeworlds like wildfire shortly afterwards. Other shortcomings may have impacted Omnimechs, as time would show, but for the purposes of the clan's ways of war, which were very ritualized and regulated, these represented the perfect weapons. Their introduction instantly made traditional mechs a thing of the past. Or at the very least, they were not nearly as valuable as they had once been perceived as. For the Phoenix Hawk IIC, this development spelled its obscurity. Clan Steel Viper, like every other clan, essentially in the wake of the dramatic successes displayed by Omnimechs in a series of wars that emerged in the Golden Century, realized that adoption of this technology, and the Omnimech chassis around it, would be key for their survival and their ability to thrive in the Kerensky cluster. They abandoned traditional designs as frontline machines, and rapidly adopted Omnimechs. The mighty and fast 80-ton assault mech they'd engineered quickly fell into second-line use. Orders for the mech were reduced by Clan Steel Viper's Tumen, and no other clans sought the mech schematics either. It became nothing more than an obscure machine, to be used by forces to garrison their own enclaves. Ironically, in 2860, the Steel Vipers would finally move out of their societal rut when Star Colonel Sanra Mercer achieved power, becoming Khan of the Wayward Clan. And by the time of her ascension, the Steel Vipers had already left their new war machine behind. A new day had dawned, and it was a day without the Phoenix Hawk IIC. An assault mech weighing in at 80 tons, the Phoenix Hawk IIC is one of the best fast assault mechs ever constructed. While it does have a multitude of trade-offs for achieving its incredible speed for its size, unlike most of its contemporaries, it manages to deliver a more often than not powerful mech. Originally built by Clan Steel Viper in 2851, this titanic monster uses almost every advanced material available at the time of its construction. To begin going over its details, as of the latest core components available for this specific model, let us start with its main features. First of all, the Phoenix Hawk IIC has a SFAM-4 type chassis. which is a clan-quality endo-steel internal structure. This saves the mech 4 tons in terms of its overall weight, at the expense of 7 internal slots, or critical spaces. This weight saving is essential for the success of a mech of its size and agility in order to accommodate key components on board. This is also a clan-quality body type, meaning that it provides the Phoenix Hawk series machine with a case system inherently. Due to the era of its construction, it has a standard gyro and cockpit, offering no additional bonuses or drawbacks. To keep this mech running cool, it comes with its baseline complement of clan-quality double heatsinks. These are entirely stored within its massive engine, taking up no additional space on board, giving it the ability to dump 20 heat every turn. Notably, this is more than adequate to keep this mech running cool. In regards to its electronic components on board, it has a Megaband System 21 communications package, as well as a D-Track Suit 4 targeting and tracking system. Neither of these provide this Herculean Phoenix Hawk with any additional benefits. In regards to its quirks, the Phoenix Hawk IIC greatly benefits in campaigns from its easy-to-maintain feature, allowing the mech to be easily kept up for service in between engagements. In addition to this, it also benefits from the fast reload feature for all torso-mounted weaponry, letting it quickly alternate to a new ammunition bin as needed. The most prominent feature of the Phoenix Hawk IIC is in fact its speed and agility for its massive size, essentially being an upgrade over the original Phoenix Hawk, and an inheritor of the heavy assault recon role pioneered by the disappointing Charger 1A1 of old. The Phoenix Hawk IIC invests a tremendous volume of resources into this particular element of its profile. The most notable feature that it is renowned for is its 26.5-ton Type 70 400XL fusion engine. This powerful, massive power plant lets the mech achieve speeds of up to 86 km per hour, or 8 movement points in the tabletop game, giving it the same agility and speed as most of the Striker medium mechs it was based on, but with the full weight of an assault chassis. This swift profile allows the mech to potentially outmaneuver and outposition most of the enemies it may come across. This also complements its defensive features as well, as the best defense is often not being struck at all. In addition to this mighty engine, the Phoenix Hawk IIC also greatly benefits from having a full jump capacity. It has 5 Grand Thrust Mark V jump jets, allowing this quick-footed behemoth to leap up to 150 meters, or 5 movement points in the tabletop game. This means that it can generate a meaningful defensive bonus just by jumping its full distance. It also allows the 2C to bypass terrain features, and gives it a massive advantage in negotiating around its enemies for maximum advantage. To say the least, the Phoenix Hawk IIC's 31.5-ton investment into mobility pays dividends. There is an abundance of defensive technologies in Battletech. However, during the original Phoenix Hawk IIC's creation, options were not quite as deep as centuries later. Still, the designers in Clan Steel Viper did use what they could justify, both with internal space and tonnage, to further protect this machine, beyond its fantastic mobility enhancing its positioning, or its clan chassis providing it with a case system. Lacking in AMS or electronic warfare, likely due to tonnage restrictions, the Phoenix Hawk IIC leans into the use of clan-quality ferrofibrous plating, more specifically the model of which is AM15 ferrofibrous. It has a total of 10.5 tons of this material overall, giving the mech 201 points of armored protection. This amount of defense is, unfortunately, not particularly high. Many mechs in the 75 to 80 ton range will have more defense pips than this as a result, though it's not necessarily a completely inadequate amount of material either. Compared to later, similarly agile machines it may compete against, like the Summoner, it is substantially more guarded. It can weather heavy fire for some time before being penetrated, though this is really not what the mech is designed for. It is a striker by nature. It is not there to be hammered by enemy fire, if it can be avoided. Another unique feature of the Phoenix Hawk IIC is in its armaments package. As a platform, this mech can't truly afford an abundance of energy weaponry, so the Steel Vipers just opted to give it no energy systems to speak of. This benefits the mech in a key way, in that it never has to worry about its heat load, unless environmental conditions or engine damage change that fortune. So, where does this leave the 2C? It leaves it, in its base form, with ballistics. Heavy ballistics. Found in both the right and left torsos, the Phoenix Hawk has a Type DL Ultra AC-10 autocannon. These powerful guns will rip out a huge volume of fire every turn they are in a reasonable engagement distance, shredding enemy armor. They also are fed by an enormous 6 tons of ammunition, giving its twin cannons 30 rounds of individual fire if both are used turn on turn, or giving the mech a total of 15 rounds of fire if both are switched into their fully automatic setting. As of right now, they are still subject to jamming, though this feature is set to change quite soon, meaning for gameplay purposes on the tabletop, this prohibitive restriction will be removed for the two guns, giving them an excellent upgrade in consistent, reliable firepower. The Phoenix Hawk IIC is one of the biggest beneficiaries of this alteration. Each round from these cannons too act as a hole puncher in essence. If it fires a volley and 2 of its 4 rounds hit, enemy mechs will be immediately forced to make a piloting skill roll. Beyond these vicious cannons, for boosting its in-close performance for crit seeking, or for the elimination of infantry targets, the 2C also supports 2 V machine guns, with one in the center torso and one in its head. So, where are the drawbacks? While its firepower output is alright, it's not exceptional compared to heavy mechs of the era, or future eras. The Timberwolf, for instance, can very much quickly outpace the 2C in terms of raw damage output. The other is, of course, that ammunition can be detonated on board from enemy fire, or the 2C, quite frankly, can just run out of ammunition itself, especially over a protracted campaign. Another issue is, when piloted by clan warriors throughout most of their history, is that these pilots will not lean into the best additional weaponry it has, its fists. The Phoenix Hawk IIC's weapons are all torso-bound, and it does have substantial metal clubs for arms, which can be extremely effective in the offense, as can charging. But these tactics are heavily discouraged, all being considered dishonorable, or desgra. In later eras, clan warrior codes change, and when inner sphere pilots begin taking these machines into the field of battle, this additional attribute very much contributes to the mech becoming even more dangerous in combat. The Phoenix Hawk IIC have the curse of arriving too early to be an Omnimech, and too late to establish itself against the more thoroughly understood and credible machines of Clan Wolf and Clan Starhatter, in the form of their Marauder and Warhammer refits. As a consequence, it is often overlooked by clan operators, or at least was traditionally, up until the latter years of the clan invasion. The reality is, though, this graceful giant is perhaps one of the best 80-ton clan battle mechs put together, often outcompeting the clan Gargoyle and others in the space of being a heavy recon asset. It has a very strong mobility profile, runs cool, giving it excellent sustainability in individual engagements, has reasonable armored protection when combined with its environment and agility, and it has decent, though not exceptional, firepower. Where the mech goes wrong is by, first of all, it not being an Omnimech. Next, it is not being extremely overgunned, as many of its later counterparts were. And finally, its real power is hidden away in its combining physical combat with onboard firepower. The Phoenix Hawk IIC is a fantastic heavy recon asset, just as the Star League envisioned. It is truly what they promised. What if a Phoenix Hawk was an assault mech? The Phoenix Hawk is great. Turns out making it bigger and stronger just increases the fight in the Phoenix. A secret meeting that Steel Viper Khan Sanra Mercer claimed took place between Ilkhan Nicholas Kerensky and Khan Stephen Breen only a few years after the successful campaign to retake the Pentagon worlds have been subject of a fair amount of speculation. Khan Mercer never once wavered from her original story and claimed to possess actual recordings from these meetings, but all attempts by other clans to obtain copies through diplomatic or military channels failed. Part of an examination by clans Ghost Bear and Wolf regarding claims made by Khan Sanra Mercer, 16th of September, 2956. The lack of vision which had diminished Clan Steel Vipers since the incident involving the unspoken Khan finally, according to history, came to a close with the promotion of Star Colonel Sanra Mercer, first into the role of Sakan of Clan Steel Viper. Sanra began to circulate reports amongst the clan within months of her appointment, those being that she had uncovered Ilkhan Nicholas Kerensky's true vision. This supposed vision, which she claimed to have video evidence for but never divulged it to anyone, was that their purpose was to conquer the former Terran hegemony in the name of the clans, and to do so in the fashion of which Alexander Kerensky liberated it during the Ameris Civil War. Once the clans accomplished this, under the leadership of course, Clan Steel Viper, they would guide the leaders of the great houses to form a new Star League. Rather than restoring the League by beating the Inner Sphere into submission, though, and forcing their leaders and people to accept might as right, as other clans wished, the Steel Vipers would prove the superiority of the way of the clans by defeating the armies of the great houses in honorable clan combat. After this triumph, they would declare the warriors and leaders of the Inner Sphere as Isorla, and would teach them the error of their ways once they were made bondsmen. And from there, they would accept the glory of the true and reformed Star League. The citizens of the Inner Sphere were to be treated as wayward children, and the Steel Vipers as their watchful parents. Shockingly, her supporters, the bulk of the clan's warriors who were now desperate for a cause that they could get behind, especially one which envisioned their clan as ruling over all of humanity, backed her. This was the higher purpose they'd been looking for. The decades of stagnation were to be over. After her message spread through the greater mass of the blood-named warriors within the clan, Jacob Masters was challenged for his khanship. She had outplayed him, keeping her politics and ambitions to her supporters, while moving around him at every turn. He realized only too late that he'd been outplayed by his elevated Sakan. In the trial that followed, one which looked like Masters would handedly win, Sanra managed to score a lucky shot to the cockpit of his aerospace fighter with her Highlander's Gauss rifle, killing the Khan instantly. This further cemented her claim that fate was on her side. History, in the eyes of Clan Steel Viper, was on Khan Mercer's side. Her supporters were then put in place to secure and consolidate power in the very institutions of the clan. From the top to the bottom, things were organized to only further support her skewed vision of what the clan was to achieve and how to get there. Technological stagnation ended. Omnimechs now began being embraced, meaning that they were now being produced and designed as trials were also launched to acquire yet more of these powerful mechs. The clan adopted a rigid, isolationist policy in regards to the other clans for the most part, barring the merchant caste, the latter of whom were closely watched as a result. This meant that even though they now participated in the Golden Century, they still didn't thrive in it. Their territories during this time did not expand substantially, except for through a few conquests. Still, the Vipers saw themselves exerting their influence, militarily, under Mercer. The battles and campaigns under her command almost exclusively used frontline Omnimechs after her reforms. Machines like the Phoenix Hawk IIC would be in, at best, second-line galaxies throughout their enclaves, and would, at most, see combat duties against oncoming clan forces that had struck unexpectedly. This limited the proliferation of these machines as well. No one sought out the Steel Viper's old second-line units for their own purposes. A few fell into the hands of Clan Jade Falcon during their multiple clashes with the Vipers, but these two simply didn't see frontline service in any major campaign. Speaking of which, a vicious rivalry broke out with none other than Clan Jade Falcon during all of this, and that led to a series of duels between the two powers. That then led to the death of the great reformer Con Mercer at the hands of the Jade Falcons on the field of battle. Despite this justified end to the Con's frankly lie-riddled, maddened journey, her legacy continued on well past her death. Even over a century after her demise, her clan espoused her virtues more than Zalman's, more often than not, especially when attempting to justify their clan's edicts and policies. The very organs of the clan, and even its culture beyond the warrior caste, had been captured by Mercer's illusions and falsehoods. Her supposed vision and claims were lionized further with each and every Con that followed in her footsteps, further isolating the clan and deviating it more and more from its cohorts. In fact, so deluded became their view of themselves that Clan Steel Viper, internally, became thought of as the only legitimate governing force in human space. Even other clans were not truly adequate. But regardless of this delusion, time still marched on. Most assumed the Vipers would adopt the Crusader ideology when the Dragoon Compromise was established due to this extremely hostile stance. But ironically, the Steel Vipers found kinship, if only briefly, in their own bizarre way, more with the Wardens than the Crusaders. They still wanted the Great Houses to exist. They still believed that these nations were to be their surrogates, not their overt conquests. In fact, when they learned the Great Houses had survived the Succession Wars, from the information garnered from the Wolf's Dragoons, their Khan was said to be relieved. Decades later, after the arrival of the Outbound Light, the Steel Vipers, like many others, would compete to participate in the invasion itself. Khan Natalie Breen and her Sakan Paragard Zalman led their clan towards the trial of participation for what was to become Operation Revival. The Steel Vipers, under their command, through tenacity and through their renowned skill, managed to almost join the invasion proper, but instead they became the official reserve clan. Of the reserve clans, they were the only ones to fully earn their role prior to the invasion itself, and launched with the other clans when the operation was undertaken. While this was quite the accomplishment, their own warriors, furious that they had not reached the top 4 slots, still challenged their Khans in several vicious trials of grievances over their failures. The Khans managed to keep their place, dispatching their challengers, and offered no apologies for their failures. Instead, they reminded their people that it was to be their time, even as a reserve clan. The door was still open to them, their clan prepared for their opportunity to finally fulfill the vision which Sanra Mercer gave them so many years ago. But their arrival was a quiet one. Much like the Phoenix Hawk IIC they'd built in the past, they simply hung in the void, suspended, awaiting their time as the clans tore through the inner sphere, achieving glory and notoriety. Their own time was seemingly never to come, until fortune's wheel turned, and fate changed for both Clan Steel Viper and the Phoenix Hawk IIC, because they were to be called upon, as the reserve, to be present and to participate in one of the most decisive battles in the history of mankind, and the most important battle of Operation Revival. Tukayyid. Developed only 1 year after the Phoenix Hawk IIC, the 2C Mark II is the second variant put together by Clan Steel Viper. It is considered by many to be the best overall Phoenix Hawk IIC available, though this does come with somewhat of a cost. It retains every technology associated with the original, and almost all of its base components. The only variance is that it does reduce its armored protection by 1 ton, making the mech truly underguarded for its tonnage bracket. However, this is traded off, along with all of its weaponry, in order to lean into clan missile technology. The 2C2 has a stunning 4 LRM-20 launchers. These allow it to unleash waves of 80 missiles per turn, and these do go all the way out to extreme ranges by mech combat standards. And unlike inner sphere missiles, they even work in close quarters. It has a total of 48 rounds of ammunition as well, giving each launcher 12 shots under optimal conditions. It is an excellent fire support platform, as well as a brutal in-close fighter, if it has to be. Interestingly, this mech serves exceptionally well with the standard Phoenix Hawk IIC, as its sibling will punch holes that its array of blistering missiles will invariably find. Overall, the 2C2, so long as it can stay out of the thickest of enemy fire and maintain its own fire discipline and heat, is an excellent, deadly machine. Does Sakan Hoshkin suggest that the Steel Viper Tumen is unfamiliar with the Aero 4 system, or the Naga Omnimech? Perhaps she is unaware that the Huey was developed in response to a requirement set forth by the great founder himself. I did not realize the education system of the Steel Viper had become this feeble. But perhaps the Hodgkins line has become unable to maintain long-term memory. Did the Sakan forget the damage inflicted to her clan on Tukayyid? Did she forget the damage suffered by all the clans at the hands of the Inner Sphere armies during the invasion? The Steel Viper so rarely faced them. The instances should be easy to memorize. Sakan Samantha Cleese of Clan Jade Falcon. The Grand Council. 3069. The launch of Operation Revival and its campaign of destruction across huge swathes of the Inner Sphere in a mad attempt to reconstitute the Star League under clan rule and laws hit the Periphery first, after dispatching what minimal resistance there was there. It crashed into the Free Rosselhaig Republic, Draconis Combine, and the Lyran half of the Federated Commonwealth. These actions began the largest and most consequential war humanity had faced since the First Succession War. Countless systems fell in rapid succession to the dramatically more technologically sophisticated and much more thoroughly drilled clan forces. Major conflagrations across the front saw key worlds such as Rosselhaig, the capital of the Free Republic, Tamar, one of the founding capitals of the Lyran Commonwealth, and Alshane, one of the major district capitals of the Draconis Combine, fall to various clan attackers. The Inner Sphere managed to find success in some smaller battles, but overwhelmingly were defeated in instance after instance. Those being at Twycross, which was a Federated Commonwealth counterattack against the Jade Falcon occupation zone, the Battle of Walcott within the Draconis Combine, and the desperate and spectacular victory that broke the Smoke Jaguars and Novacats, and that was at the capital world of the Draconis Combine, Luthien. During these climactic conflicts, the Steel Vipers and their Tumen were mostly responsible for patrolling and securing supply lines, as well as garrisoning worlds on behalf of Clan Ghostbear in particular. While many grumbled at their lower status in the invasion, almost all were still awed, even those who felt such duties were beneath them, as they were putting their feet on the soil of worlds vaunted in the histories of the clans and their remembrances. It was only after the death of Ilkhan Leo Showers and the ascension of Ulrich Kerensky into the role near the end of the invasion proper that Clan Steel Viper was fully activated. And this gave them their chance to reach for their fullest potential. The Tillman was called up, and to the Steel Vipers, this was the beginning of the prophecy. In November of 3051, Clan Steel Viper saw itself claim 3 worlds from Clan Jade Falcon, with one being ceded and the other 2 being taken in rightful trials of possession. Rapidly, they moved to make contact with the Federated Commonwealth's border, and did so by conquering 3 more worlds in their path. The clan's first true objectives had been accomplished. The Vipers even developed a new coil tactic for fighting their inner sphere opponents, which involved encircling and crushing them, offering them no escape, emulating the constricting hunting strategy of some of the snakes that inspired them. The move required their mechs to break Zelbringen, the traditional clan way of fighting, in order to achieve its maximum outcome. In addition, the Vipers had seen how dishonorable their spheroid counterparts had behaved, and were less eager to throw themselves into obvious traps. With their new tactics in tow, the Steel Vipers in 3152 were called upon not only to participate in the invasion, but to join in the culmination of the campaign. Comstar, the supposed ally of the clans, had turned on them, now demanding a trial over the fate of Terra. The Khans of the clans were to rally their best warriors and bring them to the field, to square off against the presenters of Comstar and their own army, the Com Guards. All barring clans Wolf, and to a lesser extent Ghostbear and Jade Falcon, heavily underestimated their enemy. But there were valid reasons for this mindset. First of all, their spheroid opponents so far had offered minimal resistance to the main body of Operation Revival's attack. Even with shocking defeats being delivered to several clan forces, overwhelmingly inner sphere militaries had proven not up to the task of fighting their technologically superior foes. In addition, the Com Guards were regarded as a green force, despite their war machines being of higher quality than the other spheroids they'd fought so far, but still falling behind in comparison to their own. What they did not fully grasp is that the Com Guards had been learning from them during the campaign, and had even been tailoring their mechs and other gear to directly confront them in such an instance as this trial. The planet of Tukayyid was chosen to be the stand-in for Terra herself, and each participating clan had 2 objectives to take from the Com Guards on the surface of the planet in the great trial that had been unleashed. If they won, Terra was to be theirs. If they lost, a ceasefire would be put into place that was to last 15 years. The trial itself was offered in a traditional, clan-like way, and this gave the Steel Vipers the wrong impression. While they'd fought treacherous spheroids so far, they believed that Comstar was to fight this in an honorable, clan-like way, perhaps even because of Mercer's teachings. They were very misguided in this assumption. The Steel Vipers were given the task of taking the Kozis Ranch Station and the Kelly Springs as their victory objectives. The operation as a whole was situated within the Hladno Springs region, and it was considered difficult ground to fight on for an attacking force by Comstar's assessment. It was also even easier to guard for a determined defender, and the Com Guards were determined. The Vipers had to conquer their 2 goals in order to secure a complete victory for their cause. To the south was the Nestle River Delta. Between this region and the victory conditions, though, lay an area known as the Devil's Bath, an infamous formation if there ever was one, and it turns out it would also be one that would change the fate of the clans forever. Going over the order of battle, On the Steel Viper side, there was Alpha and Gamma Galaxy, both of whom were intended to be the Viper's primary participants in the trial for Tukayyid. A third formation was also brought with them in the form of the second line Zeta Galaxy. With the 3 galaxies in hand, they would be facing off against the Comguard's 6th Army. The Vipers actually had the best combat power ratio walking into any section of the front. Their victory here, while not assured, was very probable when not factoring into account tactics and environmental conditions. It's noteworthy that, of course, Alpha Galaxy was the premier fighting force for Clan Steel Viper at the time. Gamma Galaxy 2 was a more than adequate hard-hitting array of stars and clusters. These forces were also dominated by Clan Omnimechs, as was tradition, though some small number of second-line mechs, such as a confirmed Stone Rhino, did end up in Alpha Galaxy for the battle. Their third galaxy, though, Zeta, was not intended to see fighting at all, realistically, during the engagement, and they were fitted with an array of second-line machines, as well as some Omnimechs. This force was in essence there to protect supply lines, and to also act as a fetch and carry for their frontline masters. After some debate over their landing zone, Con Breen decided to deploy to the Nestle River Delta with the entirety of her forces. The Vipers faced no resistance upon their deployment either, but knew full well the Comguards infested the region and the pathway of their advance. Breen evidently was found to have not fully understood the terrain she now invited her clan to traverse to get to their objectives. A fighting deployment much further north, while costlier up front, would have been far more prudent. Breen opted to unite both Alpha and Gamma Galaxies into a single, brutal tool to take their selected markers. Their plan was to ruthlessly break through the Comguard lines, annihilate anything in their path. Then they were to first strike and take the Kozis Ranch Station, though not the entirety of the ranch as it was far too remote, and was not their main objective anyway. From there, Zeta was to garrison this location, bringing ammunition and provisions with them, and to protect their supply lines further as they fed Alpha and Beta in order for them to strike out towards Kelly Springs, which would have its own difficulties to face in taking as well. The path was set. All that needed to happen was for their journey to go into motion. Breen and Zalman headed their forces themselves and began the assault. The Steel Vipers made several attempts to employ their coil tactics on a grand scale, to scythe through their enemies like a scythe through wheat, only to find their encirclements closed on minimal enemy forces, rear guards at best, as they fought an enemy that struck and faded, despite having been originally dug in for their defense. Ambushes hit the clans as well across several passes on their way towards where the Comguards had truly wanted them to go. The worst single battlefield, perhaps on all of Tukayyid. The Devil's Bath. The Comguards knew that the best chance of dealing with their Steel Viper adversaries was in this particular location. It was a place the Vipers would have to move through, and it was utterly inhospitable. The defenders, from set positions, and knowing the terrain, had a clear advantage and force multiplier for defending this space. The Bath also had the added benefit of making the Vipers' coil tactic almost impossible to use. The region was described as an 80-kilometer trench of absolute hell, while Cons Breen and Zalman believed this area to be little more than a network of canyons. They, along with their forces, were to discover what a nightmare this place truly was. This pit of hell was a twisting maze of geysers, granite columns, and stinking mud. Worse, the mud itself, due to geological activity, was boiling and bubbling across much of its expanse, making the substance even harder to traverse, and quite capable of bogging down even clan battle mechs. In some spaces, the mud was truly more of a hidden, thick lake than most people would associate with mere wet dirt. Upon making contact with the Bath, the comm guards launched their ambush. The Vipers had given chase to some of the stragglers from their loose opposition beforehand, and their forward elements were caught in the Bath's horrid mud immediately. An entire trinary worth of battle mechs were lost in this first engagement alone, getting mired in the soup that was the ground, and getting destroyed from well-placed, cover-hidden defenders. Some even literally drowned in the mud, as their mechs slid into the vast pools of bubbling hell they were now helplessly drawn into. This led to Con Breen, who was entirely overwhelmed by the circumstances which she was finding herself in, ordering a halt on the advance. Her eyes must have scanned what they were about to step into, and realized the horrors that must have lied in wait. The Bath would be an almost impossible obstacle to conquer without compromising the clan's efforts. Instead, she believed if she regrouped at their dropships and redeployed with a nighttime drop, it increased the chances of taking their objectives. That was why they were there, after all. The withdrawal order came from the Khan, and carefully her mech began to slink away. They only got meters before a satellite link was opened, and one of the most infamous exchanges in the entirety of the clan invasion opened up, when Presenter Bishor Yakel of the 6th Division, seeing his ambush coming undone as the Vipers pulled away, threw down the gauntlet once more to the Steel Vipers. On Terra, there are two kinds of snakes. The kind with fangs, and the kind that slink away to hide. I guess in clan space, there's only one kind. Slither back to the Periphery, Tin Vipers. You'll never see Mother Terra, but don't worry. We Freebirths will keep it safe from any dirty little snakes. Bye now. Have a safe cower home. Presenter Bishor Yakel of the Comguard's 6th Division, Tukayyid, May 3052. Every single soul on Tukayyid heard Yakel's words. Unfortunately, he did not understand the difference between a proper clan challenge, otherwise known as a bajal, and an open, grievous insult. Breen faced utter humiliation by his words, and understood that every other Khan present in system had heard the accusation of supposed cowardice towards her clan. Her, and the entirety of her clan, now needed to slaughter the Khan guards, without any mercy, just in order to save face. Instead of withdrawing and doing the right tactical move, one of the bloodiest and most unforgiving clashes of the decade took place. Alpha and Gamma galaxies charged into the Devil's Bath with almost reckless abandon. Days of fighting followed. Mechs were shattered in the battlefield, and it became evident almost immediately that no quarter was being given by either side. It was kill or be killed. Every ambush the Comguards had placed only further enraged the Vipers as both sides tore into one another. Worse for the Vipers still, many of their Omnimechs were in ammunition-dependent configurations. Over the course of the fighting, the 5th and 78 Comguard divisions depleted the clan's stocks of ammunition, blunting further Steel Viper advances still. The Vipers also immediately broke Zelbringen, striking back at Comguard vehicles, infantry, and mechs with kicks and punches as their fury was unleashed. The fighting matched the environment. All hell broke loose. And the Vipers and their Khan's rage did not subside, but only grew as the battle dragged on. What had been a plan for swift conquest was now a desperate, attritional fight for survival. More humiliating still, the Vipers were the ones who became encircled. Their normal plan, to coil around their enemies and constrict them, had been turned upon them by the elite Comguard 1st Division, which slipped in behind them and began tearing into their supply lines. Second-line warriors and their mechs were caught in the grip of battle. Many 2C configurations saw the light of day for the first time in these opening struggles, though not yet one which the Vipers were most famous for. They held off the 1st Division and kept the supplies moving, even if their losses were far from marginal in both mechs and supplies. The lifeline to the front stayed open, but only after great suffering, and only for now. Eventually, Alpha Galaxy did sate their thirst for vengeance as they managed to encircle and destroy the 6th Division, slaughtering everyone who remained, including Presenter Yakel. Tragically, before his demise, he had been denied his open calls for surrender. This did not solve the conundrum the Vipers now faced at the front line, though, as the 78th Division and the 1st Division were still in the fight. The Snake's supply situation only worsened, and their losses were mounting. Sakan Zalman formally asked Con Breen to activate Zeta Galaxy in full to relieve their frontline warriors and push on. And this is where the Phoenix Hawk IIC was first meaningfully observed by Inner Sphere forces, and fully documented. The Comguards had sensed that Gamma Galaxy was on the cusp of breaking, so their command dispatched pursuit elements within the canyons of the Devil's Bath to harry and destroy the now depleted Vipers. Instead, this entire significant force was met by a full star of Phoenix Hawk IICs and their ideal environment. The assault mechs ran cool, and thus were not badly hindered by the heat of the hellish pit. More problematic for the Comguards still, these giants weren't just fast on their feet, they could jump, and often to a comparable degree as to the cavalry medium mechs that were put into their pursuit formations. What vehicles and mechs these pursuit strikers put forward to secure their victory were instead absolutely mauled. The Phoenix Hawk IICs shredded mechs before splintering and smashing vehicles. Ironically, the Comguards had a Clanbuster variation of the Phoenix Hawk as well, and these would have been more than likely in a pursuit formation, meaning that a generational confrontation, a one-sided one, took place in all of this. The fighting was so intense that all 5 of these clan assault mechs bled through the entirety of their ammunition on board as the Zeta Galaxy warriors drove them into their bleakest opponents. The violence of the counterattack was such, however, that the Comguards themselves pulled back their cavalry and pursuit elements for fear of being caught by a counterblow of such ferocity again. Further attempts to overrun the Vipers were now treated with extreme caution. Though unappreciated by the Vipers' leadership, and unnoticed almost assuredly by their pilots, this one battle proved truly the insight the Star League of old had when it designed the heavy recon and striker element that would become the 2C variation of the Phoenix Hawk. Having the weight, firepower, and armor, as well as the ability to keep up with lighter pursuit elements, and the ability to counter enemy pursuit elements with brutality in difficult and dangerous terrain, this had proven that the mech was, beyond a shadow of a doubt, extremely flexible and reliable. These second-line warriors and their second-line mechs also proved to be more than adept at war. Real war, not the trials with which the clans jousted with one another. With these giants on their side, as well as other predators of Zeta Galaxy, the 78th Division was crushed, just as the 6th had been. The long, bloody battle of the Devil's Bath was all but at an end, and the Comguards had been vanquished. But only the Comguards in the Devil's Bath. What lay beyond the boiling mud pit was their objective, and it was now defended by the full might of the fresh 321st Division, as well as the now experienced and bloody 401st Division, who had participated in the breaking of the Smoke Jaguars earlier on world. The Vipers had only 10 kilometers to climb, but their supply situation had not recovered. The Comguards' 1st Division had also not been vanquished. Their losses were great, and even with the second-line galaxy in place, fighting valiantly at the front, proving themselves just as capable as their peers, there was a great uncertainty on if they could actually achieve victory. As if things could not get even worse, now they experienced multiple counterattacks at the very edge of the bath, deliberately preventing them from reforming their front, and thus preventing a stable advance.
My Khan, let me order the 250th forward, send Zeta to feint to the west, and draw them off the line. Then my cluster can rush in. Neg!
Breen's anger hit him like a fist.
You have no cluster, Star Colonel. Retreat now. I'm in sight of Koshitse Ranch Station.
Gerard frothed.
Are you insane or just craven?
He regretted that immediately, but it was bargained and done, and could not be taken back. Natalie Breen took a moment to reply.
If you follow your orders, Lev Gerard, I will allow you the choice of Sir Kai or a trial of grievance. Defy me again, and I will kill you right here.
For a moment he considered defying her. If he seized Koshitse Ranch Station while she ran away, the glory would be his, and she would be cast into shame. He could even challenge her for the conship, a post she surely deserved to lose. He called up the status of his command, and his jaw dropped. Less than a dozen mechs from among his 3 trinaries still read as active, and all had depleted their ammunition. His elementals were shattered, his aerospace trinary gone. All of Alpha Galaxy could perhaps press forward to victory. But alone, he and his handful of warriors would fail. He had already failed. How had it come to this? Bile rose in Lev Gerard's throat.
250th. Retreat. Repeat, fall back to LZ.
The remnants of the 250th Assault Cluster acknowledged. Mechs began to retreat, wary slumped to their shoulders as if the machines themselves felt defeated. Before setting foot in the Devil's Bath again, Gerard cast one last baleful look at the clump of structures in his rear-view screen that was Koshitse Ranch Station. His command, the respect both for and of his Khan, and likely his career, had died here today. Licking sulfur from his lips, he turned and departed Tukayyid, the accursed.
Sakan Zalman, while leading Gamma Galaxy, saw his mech destroyed, and had to be extracted from it after he was hit by a Comguard artillery bombardment. Notably, this particular attack had been done to prevent his galaxy from mustering. With Gamma Galaxy being bogged down, with her second-in-command defeated, with no remaining ammunition for frontline forces, and with an enemy still quite prepared and more than determined to fight and die on the front lines, on May 12th, Con Breen ordered the withdrawal she'd wanted to days earlier. Only this evacuation would be much more permanent. Zeta Galaxy became their rearguard, with leaping Phoenix Hawk IICs and a variety of other clan second-line mechs holding the line where they needed in order to prevent the Comguard pursuit from taking a greater toll on the clan. Breen had an opportunity to re-engage here, if she wanted. There was a chance to still resupply, board their dropships, and attempt a night attack. But 25% of her force had already been killed in action, and this said nothing of the damage done to the remainder of her equipment and forces. Fighting for the remaining objectives would not have had a certain outcome. But more tragically, it would have meant the destruction of her remaining force. Her clan might win, but it would never recover in a meaningful sense. Any future ambition of Clan Steel Viper in the Inner Sphere would die with this uncertain potential victory. Con Breen did not make the gamble to win the campaign. She instead chose to preserve her forces. This defeat, however, scarred the clan in ways few could fully comprehend, especially after the defeat of the clans as a whole. at the hands of Comstar. In the immediate aftermath of her capitulation, Breen officially resigned as Khan of Clan Steel Viper. Labeled the Phoenix Hawk IIC-9 by Clan Seafox in the years after the clan invasion, the 2C9 is ironically the third and final variant of the Phoenix Hawk IIC purpose-built by its original creators, Clan Steel Viper. First constructed in 2853, it was their attempt to compromise between their original design as well as their heavy missile variation, turning the 9 systems into an overt mixture of missiles and autocannons. For many, it is the most balanced variant of the design. It retains the original 2C's armor and internal systems, only changing its weaponry. It also keeps the original's machine guns as well. After this, in the right torso, it mounts an Ultra AC-10 autocannon with 20 rounds of ammunition. Then, in the left torso, it mounts twin LRM-20s with 24 rounds of ammunition. Bluntly, as you can clearly see, this is a compromise between the two designs, and it's really shockingly excellent. It enhances and diversifies both variants' firepower, in essence. The tragedy is, at some point this configuration broadly fell out of favor with Clan Steel Viper, becoming so uncommon as to be unnumbered by other clans until much later, when it was put back into production again, long after Clan Steel Viper had departed from the primary war zones of the Inner Sphere.
It is not surprising, Khan Marth, that you cannot see the deterioration of your own clan's genetic strains. Further, it is possible you do not see the harm you do your own clan by elevation of free births to power within the clan, or your willingness to deny a true-born a blood name so that a free-born might win it. And it is clear that in your own clan mythology, you've obscured the fact that the greatest of your own heroes was himself an aberration, an abomination, who was indeed something of a sham hero in his...
Zalman did not have to go on. Even as he was speaking, Marth had started to descend from her tier down toward the Steel Viper place in the council. He tensed.
You vile Stravag!
Marth shouted.
Your lies foul the air. Your accusations are the lowest use of politics I have heard in this chamber. It is you, Paragard Zalman, who is the filthy freebirth, and I challenge you to a trial.
An exchange between Khan Paragard Zalman of Clan Steel Viper and Khan Marth Pride of Clan Jade Falcon. In the prelude to the Hegira War, 31st of January, 3060. 31 January, 3060.
Up until the Battle of Tukayyid, the Phoenix Hawk IIC played next to no role in major frontline operations as launched by Clan Steel Viper. In fact, it seems to have fallen off in terms of active production within the clan, even to some extent. This 80-ton agile giant had an enormous amount of potential as a platform. The clan biases had truly never allowed these to be realized. This inbuilt attitude did apply to more superb battle mechs than just the Phoenix Hawk IIC though. Clan warrior traditions, really their guiding ideology, more or less placed anything that wasn't an Omnimech as being beneath a high-quality warrior. The fact that Gamma Galaxy had literally been saved by a single star of second-line mechs, with supposedly unworthy second-line warriors, simply did not penetrate through the established views of the time. It was in the aftermath of the humiliating defeat on Tukayyid, though, that finally, after 200 years, its fate began to delaminate, or peel away from its creators. It ironically had nothing to do with the Mech's excellent performance in the most key battle of the century so far. The fates of creation and creator were to diverge from one another. The Phoenix was about to be let loose from the flawed cage its masters had created for it, though it still had one final trial to undertake exclusively beneath the banner of the Steel Vipers. In the era of the enforced ceasefire of Tukayyid, things were not static, either politically or militarily. The Steel Vipers needed to guard their supply lines and its newly conquered worlds. This was done with, unsurprisingly, second-line machines, and the Phoenix Hawk IIC was a notable component of these defensive forces. Raids launched by the Federated Commonwealth, clandestinely, as well as mercenaries they hired, were met by the Goliath the Steel Vipers still kept in service. It earned a vicious reputation among Inner Sphere pilots who faced it down at that. It moved with unmatched grace for its size and hit like a heavier assault mech. Very few spheroid mechs of similar qualities could truly hope to match it. However, on the political front, despite holding onto these newly won planets, the Vipers also sought to expand their territories, and did so with small gains where they could, and the giant Phoenix played little to no role in this. Where things were to change, though, is in what many would have considered a minor exchange, but it became one of the most consequential struggles that the Steel Vipers ever placed themselves in, a conflict that came to be known as the Hegira War. What led to this conflagration? Over the course of a decade in the Inner Sphere, old rivalries were revived between the Vipers and Falcons. But it wasn't just that. Personal animosity and prejudice played an outsized role as well. In other words, leadership from the Viper side made the clash all but inevitable. After the resignation of Khan Breen, who had remained a behind-the-scenes power figure after her official departure, Sakan Paragard Zalman ascended to the rank of Khan. Zalman kept the Tumen in order for the better part of 10 years after the losses on Tukayyid, and had also played a decisive role in the rebuilding of the Steel Viper's strength within the Inner Sphere. He worked with and used his Sakan, Christopher Ahmed, to aggressively prey on Jade Falcon worlds throughout the 3050s in order to expand his clan's presence, and otherwise played the role of a more dignified figure to the other clans, barring his outbursts and critiques of others regarding freebirths and their supposed generous treatment within other clans. In 3058, the first true setback, knowingly or not, set in when Star Colonel Brett Andrews slew Sakan Christopher Ahmed. This happened after Ahmed's failure to meaningfully exploit the weaknesses of Clan Jade Falcon in the aftermath of the brutal refusal war due to political miscalculations. The war in question had seen the Jade Falcons and Wolves both greatly diminished, so failing to take advantage of their weakness in a meaningful way set the Steel Vipers back, as their own occupation corridor was still significantly smaller than their Falcon counterparts. Andrews himself would go on to play a role not only in the disastrous outcomes for the Steel Vipers in the Inner Sphere, but would also play a key role in the implosion of the politics of the clan Homeworlds, only 10 years after his rise to prominence within the clan. With these two figures at the helm, Clan Steel Viper marshaled the entirety of their resources to launch a war of conquest and punishment against the Jade Falcons in the aftermath of the destruction of Clan Smoke Jaguar. Using subterfuge to masquerade their forces build-up in the Inner Sphere, the Vipers struck like lightning in 3061 against the still ailing Jade Falcons. To make an attack like this possible, every element of the Tumen would have been used at some level. Frontline Omnimech machines, of course, were the norm, but reserves, also known as second-line forces, would have been used in less important regions of the attack, and to immediately garrison captured enclaves and holdings across the front. The assault, initially led by Brett Andrews, saw the Vipers seize a multitude of worlds as the Falcons were put on the back foot. Unfortunately for the Snakes, Con Martha Pride, using her friendly relationship with Clan Wolf's Vlad Ward to her advantage, counterstruck the Vipers from the Wolf invasion corridor, cutting into the soft underbelly of the Snakes' advance. Viper second line and garrison clusters, both of which deployed the Phoenix Hawk IIC, were caught utterly unprepared to deal with the battle-hardened warriors of Clan Jade Falcon, and were rapidly dispatched. The quality of their machines did not match the Falcons for the purposes of the campaign, but more importantly, they were caught entirely by surprise, making plans to defend their holdings an uphill battle regardless. Worlds were recaptured and supply lines were cut, leaving the Snakes in a perilous position. These kinds of typical setbacks only further cemented the traditional outlook of clan warriors regarding non-omnimechs, and certainly did nothing to help reserve battlemechs or the formations they were in. Clan military planners remember failure more than they do successes, it would seem. Regardless, the fighting in the war grew more and more bitter, with even Zelbringen being tossed aside as the two clans savaged one another with all that they had, both in front and second line formations. The Falcons put everything on the line, proposing a trial to see the Vipers ejected from the inner sphere in their entirety. In the final battle of the war, on the planet of Waldorf, near the desolated capital city of Daemon, Khan Paragard Zalman and his Trisarch Keshik fought and lost to the Falcon Guards, including a freeborn warrior. This unexpected and devastating defeat sealed the end of Clan Steel Viper in the inner sphere, and ironically, also ended the Steel Viper's exclusivity, and likely even remaining production, of the Phoenix Hawk IIC. The Vipers were to begin a journey that was now homeward bound, abandoning all they had gained in the inner sphere. They failed to enact Mercer's mission. Zalman managed to hold onto his conship for the moment, even as his forces slinked back to their cave in humiliation and defeat, and he cut a deal that would change the face of heavy recon forces across human space. Forever, even if he didn't know it. The Steel Vipers once more needed to recover from disaster, though this one stung more than the setback on Tukayyid. They needed mechs and materials, especially since a large volume of their first and second line machines had been lost to the Falcons, who now gleefully salvaged them to rebuild their own forces. The only ones they could strike such a bargain with, reliably, to get their own Tumen back in order fast, were the ever-dubious Clan Diamond Shark. The Sharks themselves recently had somewhat of a significant change, in the form of a low-key coup d'etat, where the merchants had all in but name seized the clan, for their purposes. The other clans tolerated it, for the moment, as the facade of a warrior caste still ran the skin suit of the operation, or in some instances, these clans hadn't yet caught on as to what had really happened within the ranks of the Sharks. Still, in their weakened state, the Vipers found that the demand for mechs in their Tumen far outstripped their capacity to provide them, with frontline, second line, or even refit battle mechs. Their resources were stretched dangerously thin, and so Khan Zalman was compelled to reach out to the Diamond Sharks in their time of need. Normally, this was actually the worst time to, in fact, come to a deal with an entity of exploitative merchants. But the Diamond Sharks and their leadership saw something the Steel Vipers didn't when negotiations started. Instead of turning the screws on Khan Zalman, at least in a brazen way, the Diamond Sharks made a modest proposal. In exchange for the full rights to produce the ancient Phoenix Hawk IIC, as well as access to heavy laser technology, the Diamond Sharks would provide a plethora of second-line battle mechs to the Steel Vipers, including a new variant of the Phoenix Hawk IIC itself, which were to be first distributed in this arrangement to the Steel Vipers. This was considered a boon to the Vipers, at least at first, but they had badly neglected the Phoenix Hawk IIC chassis for the entire tenure of their ownership over it. It was in reality a fantastic platform, and could easily be improved upon with modern construction techniques and new weapon variations. These were things the Vipers themselves never even imagined, and so quite quickly, this once obscure and ancient design, one which never received the appreciation it was due, rapidly became a figure in the Diamond Shark's bazaars. New weapon configurations with deadly packages seemed to appear overnight, and were not only distributed to the Vipers, who were shocked by their quality, but were also sold at high margins to other clans across the Kerensky cluster and Inner Sphere, as well as filling their own Tumen's ranks. What the Vipers and their merchants had neglected and allowed to languish and rot amongst the ruins of their second-line machines, the Diamond Sharks themselves were now spinning into gold, as these second-line monsters walked off assembly lines and found their way into mech-hungry clans bent on achieving their own military objectives. This was where the divergence between creation and creator was finalized. The Steel Vipers had been the masters of this machine for 2 centuries, and their fate was entirely intertwined with this old loyal design. As soon as they discarded it for profit, without even realizing they could have exploited it for themselves, the Phoenix Hawk IIC flourished as never before, spreading its wings and becoming a staple across a dozen clans. Within only a few years, not only were their fates now divided, they were to be on entirely different paths. For the 2C was to continue to flourish in the decades to come, and the Steel Vipers were to become unspoken. The break in their path could not be starker. And that fate is even intertwined with the fact that they had been allowed to rebuild by selling off this ancient but precious asset. The consequences of this sale giving the Steel Vipers a true lifeline to survival would reverberate throughout human history forevermore. The Phoenix Hawk IIC-3, ironically the 4th variant to be developed chronologically for the Battletech, is the first Clan Diamond Shark, or later Clan Sea Fox, variation of this underrated machine to appear. First walking off assembly lines in 3062, less than a year after the Vipers were cast from the Inner Sphere by Clan Jade Falcon, it follows a very familiar overall approach to the Battletech. The 2C3 holds on to the mech's armor, engine, jump jets, and internal structure. No significant changes are made in this instance. Where things do change are in the realm of cooling and the weapons on board. To start with, it has 22 double heat sinks on board, letting it vent up to 44 points of heat per turn. This is an absolute necessity given its incredibly dangerous and hot payload. A targeting computer is also added to the mech in order to help offset some of its accuracy penalties. Where do these penalties come from, you may ask? Well, the Phoenix Hawk IIC-3 has a pair of Clantech heavy large lasers, which means that if they did not use a targeting computer, these would suffer a negative modifier to hit. They also do a great deal of destruction, with them doing 16 points of damage per hit, and giving the 2C3 the opportunity to headcap targets if they score a lucky hit. These generate an enormous 36 heat, however, but given its significant cooling capacity, it means this mech can jump and fire both heavy lasers without incurring any major problems. Though these are not the only things in its arsenal, as it does have backup weapons as well, in the form of 2 Clan Small Pulse lasers and a Medium Pulse laser. Both heavy lasers and the Small Pulse lasers are mounted between the right and left torso, and the Medium Pulse laser is in the center. Overall, this mech can deal with infantry, light vehicles, and mechs, and it has no ammunition dependency at all. It is extremely dangerous, especially when combining this firepower with its impressive agility. Appearing a mere 3 years after the deal with the Diamond Sharks to inherit the design, more specifically in 3065, the Phoenix Hawk IIC is a brutally dangerous battle mech, leaning into a new technology for the time, what the clans called an advanced tactical missile system. This iteration of the Phoenix Hawk is heavily inspired by the original 2C2 variation, which leaned purely into missile-based firepower. In this instance, though, these versatile missile systems are a truly devastating upgrade. As with all prior variations of the Phoenix Hawk IIC, it replicates the 2C1's internal structure, engine, jump capacity, and armor. It also retains the original's heat sinks as well, as this variation is entirely ammunition dependent. In total, there are 4 ATM-9 launchers on board, with 7 tons of ammunition in total. This gives it approximately 2 tons of ammunition per type, plus 1 extra ton, though pilots will mix and match based on their preferences. These can be useful for long-range engagements, medium-range strikes, and in-close brawling. An HE bombardment from its 4 launchers, for instance, can deliver a hellish 108 damage, even if that is extremely unlikely. And at medium ranges, it can deliver a theoretical, though blistering 72 damage. Back attacks, or hunting lighter mechs with it, will be more than possible with its extremely dangerous payload. Its primary weakness? It can run out of ammunition faster than the original Phoenix Hawk IIC, and then it will be entirely left to its fists. But anything it discharged its launchers at? Well, they won't need ammunition anymore either. Their concerns are more than likely in the next life, not this one. Though we are not so arrogant as to believe that the currents in which the Diamond Sharks swim must carry all other clans, the Diamond Sharks have had much to teach their brethren. Progressive and flexible, these qualities give our clan an undeniable strength, a solidarity that transcends the caste system. Even when thrust into the darkest depths, the Diamond Sharks found ways to survive and even prosper, where a militarily stronger, but more hidebound clan might have snapped under the pressure. Loremaster Semi-Kalasa. Fortune's wheel turned for Clan Diamond Shark on Tukayyid, the same as it did for Clan Steel Viper. The clan was utterly sundered, far worse than their Steel Viper cousins. Only a literal handful of true-born, blood-named clan warriors remained in viable places within the clan, and their reserve units and freebirths essentially became the commanding power within the organization. Even with Con Hawkins, a known and virulent anti-Freebirth Khan and Crusader at the helm still in the aftermath of their astounding and humiliating defeat on Tukayyid, it did not hold back change as it evolved. Merchants within the clan essentially quietly but surely overtook the warriors at this point, and fundamentally altered the way the clan operated moving forward. Business and trade were key elements of Clan Diamond Shark, even when it was still known as Clan Sea Fox. Their strength came through economic leverage, and even their peers knew this from outside of the clan. Now, that order was being solidified and legitimized, whereas before it was being much more inferred, rather than being put into the public's eye. Still, the Sharks had to make smart plays for key industries in order to continue to control trade between the clans in the wake of the failure that was Operation Revival. More importantly, they made key investments in captured inner sphere worlds in order to begin producing clan-quality equipment to distribute across more active war zones in the Inner Sphere. One of the most notable examples of where this took place was on Twycross. The planet of Twycross had been a major battlefield in the initial invasion. It first fell to Clan Jade Falcon during the initial assault, before it was liberated by the Federated Commonwealth in their first major counterattack against their Jade-clad foes. Steiner rule over the planet, though, was not indefinite after this stunning victory, as Clan Steel Viper would quickly fill the void, seizing it for themselves. Looking to upset their Falcon rivals, they seized the planet in a brutal and fast campaign. More battles followed over the coming decade, until eventually the planet fell into the hands of Clan Diamond Shark, and they would have some stake on the world and system forevermore. While ownership may have moved away from the Diamond Sharks officially, eventually, their enclaves and factories would always remain in their hands, and this outpost, along with others, became part of the reinforced spine of the Sharks, as their goods and war materials began supporting their fellow clans. And it is from here that the Diamond Sharks centered their production of the Phoenix Hawk IIC battle mechs for the purposes of distribution in the Inner Sphere. Already they'd opened a production line on Babylon and the clan Homeworlds to do the same over there. The repurposed local branch of Trellshire Heavy Industries was to be the new permanent home of the 2C going forward, though. Second-line mechs were in demand across clan space by the time of its procurement, and the Sharks were happy to innovate on the design and distribute it in all of its forms. More than just that, the Sharks went a step further. During the 3050s, the clan had already been clandestinely trading with Inner Sphere clients, something which would cause a great deal of controversy both within and outside of the clan. By the 3060s, this became even more evident. The greatest concern the broad whole of the Children of Kerensky had, when this was discovered, was that if the Diamond Sharks traded their best and most capable war machines to the Inner Sphere, it'd give the industrially more powerful and numerous forces of the Inner Sphere a distinct advantage. The Sharks were able to calm these concerns enough by the 3060s, though, by agreeing only to sell dated clan technologies and designs, like the original Phoenix Hawk IIC. This did just enough to ease the stress on the clan, but there was still something self-interested beneath all of that too. The Phoenix Hawk, in its original two configurations, were perfect traps to any Inner Sphere buyers. They created permanently dependent mercenary units or house forces that operated them just due to the nature of what they were. Repair parts and contracts are always a part of any new mech sale. Clients need to understand that they maintain their new weaponry as needed, and servicing with too many strings attached can sink any product. The Sharks knew this well by this point. The Phoenix Hawk IIC was a Trojan horse all the same. House militaries jumped at the opportunity to gain access to a fast-moving, technologically advanced clan assault mech when it became available to them, especially with the Federated Commonwealth Civil War raging and sending shockwaves through the Inner Sphere. Unfortunately for them, what they got was more than they bargained for, because the Diamond Sharks, for every Phoenix Hawk IIC sold to their Inner Sphere buyers, got someone wholly dependent on their very expensive supply chain. Clan ammunition, used in both their missile launchers and autocannons, is of a particular quality that cannot be, over the long term, readily substituted for Inner Sphere munitions. This means that the Sharks were able to inflate costs in regards to their ammunition for their Inner Sphere clients. It also meant that at times, being able to control the supply of ammunition as well limited their clients' actions as needed, or using the supply as a punishment without endangering other aspects of their service contracts. Those who tried to dodge the exorbitant fees by using Inner Sphere-based munitions, they would find themselves rapidly wearing out the missile launchers and autocannons their mechs depended on, meaning that their clients would need to replace whole systems on board, rather than just the bullets that went into them. And guess what? They had to buy those from Clan Diamond Shark as well. It was a dastardly play, but it made the Diamond Sharks notable profits off of their new spheroid partners. What had been Clan Steel Viper's staple was transformed into a commodity in real time. In its various forms over the coming ages, it proliferated. The Diamond Sharks profited off of it, and innovated in terms of exploiting their client base to the maximum. In essence, the Phoenix Hawk IIC evolved from being a weapon of war, albeit a second-line one, from a single clan, and transformed into a money-making opportunity. Clan clients picked up more advanced variants from the Sea Foxes both in the Homeworlds and in the Inner Sphere as well. Great Houses and mercenary clients were given the older models, and were stuck with the absurd ammunition costs we just mentioned, which the Sharks devoured greedily. There was only one problem. This arrangement was going to come to an end. In the Inner Sphere, the Word of Blake launched a holy war against anyone, seemingly, and many Sea Fox facilities, including those on Twycross, were caught in the crosshairs. And in the Homeworlds, where you would expect clan assets to be safe, the first masters of the Phoenix Hawk IIC were making a move that would change the Homeworlds forever. New technologies had indeed begun to trickle their way into every military by the late 3060s. Even amongst places such as the clans, despite their already advantageous position, the Phoenix Hawk IIC-5 reflected this. Built exclusively on Trellshire, this Inner Sphere grown variant embraces the cutting-edge and dangerous Hag Gauss weapon systems. As with many of its cousin variants, the 5 emulates almost all of the original 2C's internal systems, jump jets, and armor. It once more primarily just reallocates weaponry on board to change its fundamental outputs. The changes are very simple in this case. Divided between the right and left arms, it has 4 AP Gauss rifles. This is for shredding infantry, light targets, and battle armor. This does limit its ability to punch, however, if it gets in too close. There is a total of 40 rounds of fire on board for all 4 rifles. After this, the main show is its pair of Hag 20 systems. These both have 12 rounds of fire each. They work at all ranges, and can put devastating fire on target. While it is not as concentrated in terms of its damage output as the original's Ultra AC-10s, these Hags will consistently land more damage on target over a broader range, and scatter over a greater surface area of their adversaries, giving it a greater chance of crit fishing. Overall, it's an interesting trade-off, and with its mobility combined with this new kind of firepower, it's a more difficult obstacle than you might imagine, if you find yourself on the other side of the battlefield.
Glory removes all pain. A glorious death is the stairway to the remembrance. Khan Paragard Zalman of Clan Steel Viper. Unknown location. 3059.
It is only fitting that here, we examine at least part of what happened to those who built the Phoenix Hawk IIC first, and where their fate resides within the homeworlds of the clans. This is also a tale that was only made possible because of the Phoenix Hawk IIC's sale to their arms supplier as well, sending the entirety of history on a chaotic and violent spiral. Clan Steel Viper, the originators of the Phoenix Hawk IIC, and the ones who still most prominently used it in their second-line forces as of 3069, had relocated in full back to the clan homeworlds. From there, They sought to retain what shreds of dignity, relevance, and honor that they could. Another tragedy would befall the weakened clan shortly after their deal with Clan Diamond Shark, however, and it is something that changed the course of all humankind. It was all started by a campaign few would have recognized as a prominent event, even. Khan Zalman had kept his position, and was attempting to rally his strength in order to rebuild his clan in the immediate aftermath of the Higira War. Unfortunately for him, in 3065, this would culminate in the Battle for Loom, against one of the fiercest adversaries of the Homeworlds, and one which often doesn't get spoken much about, Clan Snowraven. The Ravens, sensing weakness even prior to the Viper's return to the Homeworlds in full, attempted to pick away at the supposed corpse that was left of the Steel Snakes. Unironically, Steel Viper second-line formations were the ones facing off against the overpowering force striking out against them. This changed when the main Tumen returned, and that quickly began to reverse the fortunes of the Ravens, who almost immediately had to fall back on their use of warships. This tragically culminated in the Vipers viciously striking back at their Snowraven opponents, which then led to the aforementioned Battle of Loom. Ground forces were denied Safcon, and the Khan of Clan Steel Viper was killed in the void as his dropship was annihilated by the Snowraven warship Avalanche. Both sides were badly bloodied in the battle all the same, and both needed to recover. Unfortunately for every single soul in the Kerensky cluster and Pentagon worlds, it was Sakan Brett Andrews who rose to replace Paragard Zalman as Khan. Andrews was radicalized by the setbacks of his clan in the Inner Sphere, and by the spheroid's martial and civilian culture. In addition, he became obsessed with the idea that those who were connected now to the Inner Sphere were somehow tainted.
In order to redeem the Inner Sphere from its corruption and taint, it requires that we ourselves be of purity. Only without taint can we remove the iniquity that so poisons the Inner Sphere. A poison that began to spread after the Great Father started our founders upon our journey. Putting the clans into position requires extreme measures. We must remove the taint that has beset us, much as it beset our wayward brethren in the Pentagon worlds so many generations ago. Reaving our impurities is the only answer.
An excerpt from Con Brett Andrews' work, Reflections on the Way of Kerensky.
Chaos had run through the clan political system with the failure of Operation Revival, but this was made only deeper with the destruction of Clan Smoke Jaguar, as well as with the peace that was imposed upon them from the Second Star League in the Great Refusal. Many clans had become locked out from the relative prosperity of the Inner Sphere. A cultural fissure was appearing as well between the clans within the sphere, which had forced them to adopt new military tactics, as well as had exposed them to comparative economic abundance in human cultures, and those who were left behind in squalor, and who were bitterly clinging closely to the old ways. Only one true great power remained within the Homeworlds militarily as well, which was Clan Staradder, and now all the smaller clans were trying to snatch what they could out from under the distracted, Inner Sphere-bound powers. Seeking to become a big player in their own right, the Vipers, under Con Brett Andrews, formed an alliance with Clans Cloud Cobra and Staradder, which became known as the Snake Alliance. On the Clan Council, this trio engineered and manipulated political instability over the course of years, as the contradictions between the clans grew ever more violent and irreconcilable. The fate of the Phoenix Hawk IIC in this bloodbath, as planets in the clan homeworlds were in many cases made unlivable, or were devastated by warfare as the council started to become undone, was to be thrust into the heart of chaos. The planet of Babylon was a key world throughout the early fighting. Babylon was home to a significant Clan Diamond Shark enclave, and within that lay the production site of the Phoenix Hawk IIC for its distribution across the Kerensky Cluster and Pentagon worlds. With the invasion clans, including the Diamond Sharks, being targeted by the Snakes, this place became a battlefield almost immediately. The Steel Vipers turned on their once allies, the Diamond Sharks, in favor of their new friends. The justification? The Diamond Sharks were turncoats, who had dealt clan weaponry and equipment to spheroid barbarians. All of the acts of trade and goodwill between the Snakes and their shark weapons dealers evaporated in favor of ruthless ambition and territorial expansion. Knowing full well the importance of controlling the industrial power of their now merchant enemies, Brett Andrews orchestrated a devastating attack towards some of the more vital resources they had to hand. Within his clan's striking distance, of course. Babylon was assaulted, with the Vipers aiming to outdo their Star Adder allies in the opening stages of what was to become the Reavings, by doing away with their primary target with vigor. The Adders had stalled on their own attack on York against the Blood Spirits, much to the surprise of her allies, and this became the Vipers' chance to prove their own worth. On September 20th, 3070, a significant warship battle emerged over Babylon between two naval forces, with the Vipers using a new Leviathan-class warship, which they named the Perigard Zalman. It smashed through the defending Diamond Shark vessels, destroying the CDS Bloodletter and Predator in her first pass alone. Diamond Shark merchant class and civilian vessels fled the system in a panic as soon as the Shark fleet was savaged by the Vipers, leaving the planet to the vicious and violent anger of the Vipers, who were now trying to take it for their own. The war on the surface gave mixed results for the Vipers, but the message left in space was unquestionable. Their might had to be respected. As an aside, notably, the Vipers then took their vengeance out on the Snow Ravens, clashing in a major engagement above Lum, where a total of 6 naval stars, 3 per side, ripped into one another. Here, the Zalman performed exceptionally as well, breaking their enemy not in 1, but 2 battles. The naming of this vessel also seems to have been deliberate, as a message to the Ravens about achieving revenge for their fallen Khan. The Ravens were already preparing to depart entirely from the Homeworlds by this point, and these losses ensured that had to happen. After these brutal engagements, the bird-centric clan had been hollowed out, giving the Vipers yet another conquest in their road to building up their forces for the full breadth of their ambitions. With the Diamond Shark enclaves on Babylon under siege, and with stripping any of the materials they could find off of the battlefields they had just won, the Vipers could better feed their Tumen with new equipment, and most importantly, with new battle mechs. But the situation continued to evolve for the Alliance, and rapidly at that. While Khan Nabuta and Khan Steiner played key roles in the chaos themselves, they were not the ones to seize power within the Clan Council, though Nabuta came close at one point. After multiple failed Ilkhans, though, the Council needed to make a decisive turn. A turn that, unknowingly to most of the clans, was to be ushering in chaos, disunity, and destruction that had not been seen since the Pentagon Wars, and certainly not at the scale that was to come. Brett Andrews made deals in the aftermath of yet another vote for the seemingly endlessly rotating Ilkhan ship, promising new invasion opportunities, and with him pointing out that Clan Steel Viper, by reverting to the fighting methods of the clans exclusively, had won great battles and wars since their return to the Kerensky cluster against the Coyotes, Falcons, Ravens, and Diamond Sharks. All of these clans had reasons now to hate the Steel Vipers too, but none more so than Clan Diamond Shark. Betrayals and the twisting of goodwill is not something that is easily forgotten or forgiven. Still, the Viper's accomplishments were given as proof to the validity of his plans and strategies. Andrews was elected Ilkhan by a plurality on the council floor, Perhaps the Star Adders and Cloud Cobras knew what was to come next, but not many of the other supporters had any idea, especially not those who were immediately to be targeted by the vengeful embodiment of the Homeworld clans. In his first address within the council chambers, immediately after becoming Ilkhan, Andrews announced that the only road to success for the clans would be through purity, not only of action, but of blood. He further announced that any blood names that resided within the inner sphere were tainted and corrupted by their very presence there.
They lack the purity of honor necessary to deserve to take Terra and compete for the Great Father's dream. As such, the tainted legacies and any warriors created from them will be subject to trials of Reaving, to be executed by honorable clans deemed free of the taint.
The intention was, then stated, for all of the affected blood names to be reaved to their pre-revival genetic records, and wiping out all generations and iterations that had come since. This edict caused an uproar in the council chambers from many of the Sakans and Khans present. In order to reassert himself and take command, Andrews declared a trial of Reaving against Sakan Angus Labov of Clan Diamond Shark. It was accepted, and was to immediately occur in personal combat on the council floor. Labov, the great reformer and merchant who'd taken command functionally of his clan years prior, and a man who the Steel Vipers indirectly could thank for their own survival, was killed by a hidden throwing knife at the onset of the challenge. His blood splattered and leaked across the council floor. This dishonorable display was the beginning of the Wars of Reaving. Ghost Bear, Jade Falcon, the Wolves, Diamond Shark, Snow Raven, Blood Spirit, Goliath Scorpion, and even the Hell's Horses all became victims of it, as whole enclaves and worlds were torn asunder and stripped bare in order to feed the Snake Alliance and their allies. A massacre even started in the immediate aftermath on the surface of Stranimekti due to the madness that Andrews had unleashed. It failed to stop many of the most important figures from departing, and getting out the word of the treachery on the very capital of the clans as a whole. And in all of this, the military, the Clan Tumans, had already changed radically in spite of what Khan Andrews had said, and it had started with Clan Staradder only a handful of years prior. Other clans followed in their footsteps, including Clan Steel Viper, quite quickly. What was this dramatic shift, you may ask? The embracing of second-line machines, especially 2C mechs, and front-line formations of Clan Tumans. While this breakthrough in warrior culture was at first achieved by the Warhammer 2C, as it was used to great success by Clan Staradder against the Blood Spirits in frontline engagements, it didn't just apply to one mech. This meant that across the battlefields of the Wars of Reaving, and of the Holy War now emerging in the Inner Sphere, the Phoenix Hawk IIC, when employed by clan forces, was finally given its due. Frontline Galaxy formations employed this mech, and many others, when it was tactically appropriate to do so, or when pilots demanded it. In many ways, this mech was the forerunner to Clan Heavy Mech and Light Assault Mech design. This magnificent marvel, built out of a Star League project to revolutionize recon and striker formations, was now allowed to display the true power and form the Vipers had hidden away for so long. It's not hard to imagine many clan warriors, across both fronts, finding value in it while sitting behind its command console. In clan space specifically, the Vipers used this mech to the greatest effect and most consistently, as even among those who'd bought these mechs from the Sharks, they had procured the most, that every Tuman would have found these trickling into their front lines as the true value was put on display. Autocannons, heavy lasers, advanced tactical missile systems, onboard fast, armored, and agile chassis cut through targets in battle after battle and trial after trial. And while this was happening, the expulsion of the Inner Sphere clans took place. The Kerensky Bloodhouse was lost to the Homeworlds, as the Snakes and their allies made a play for it. and much to their chagrin, failed to secure it. Things appeared to be going their way regardless. However, their own agendas had caused yet more turmoil. Another rupture. The rise of Brett Andrews was a step too far for many. Already fermenting for generations, the Society made their move. The Society, more or less a major element of the clan science caste intent on overthrowing the clan warrior caste and dominating humanity from that point forward, had already in essence co-opted the Coyotes, which had always had a strong affinity for their scientists, in the same way that the Diamond Sharks had for their merchants. The results were catastrophic as the Society took their allies, the Dark Caste, elements of the defunct clan Burrock, and scientists from all of the clans, and used advanced weaponry, including biological warfare, to kill countless millions. In the opening of 3072, the Coyotes struck at the Steel Vipers, Diamond Sharks, and others. They wiped out a full galaxy of Viper troops on Ironhold even, the former Jade Falcon capital. A few months later, Clan Coyote and their Society masters seized Babylon from the Steel Vipers, and other enclaves as well. This was to be the final transition of the planet's ownership. The attack itself was delivered with almost no mercy, fully embodying the violence that was now spreading across the homeworlds. Warriors were denied their rights to surrender even, in the face of the attack. What few survivors managed to depart had all been infected with a variety of genetic-specific strains, in order to further damage the bloodlines of all of the clans who departed the world, or gave these people safe passage. Beyond atrocities against their opponents, there's one other very noteworthy aspect to the fall of Babylon, in that with this changeover, the Phoenix Hawk IIC, in regards to the Homeworlds, was now in the hands of its final masters. Clan Coyote would retain the Mech forevermore, as far as we can tell. This weapon became yet another piece in their arsenal, and the arsenal of the Society. But it was not enough to save the Society. With all of their resources, they and their Coyote allies were crushed by the Snake Alliance, as the full depths of their infiltration was revealed. The Coyotes were hollowed out, though appeared to have retained Babylon by the end of the war. The Spheroid clans were entirely repulsed from the Homeworlds. The Snow Ravens were made refugees, fleeing into the Inner Sphere. The Diamond Sharks were entirely rebuked as well. Even Clan Ice Hellion was savaged from the scene. The Fire Mandrills too were entirely destroyed, and seemingly by a combination of their own hand, as well as from outside rebels. After countless battles, the use of bioweapons, orbital bombardments, and wanton slaughters, only the Blood Spirits, who suffered a terrible fate shortly after the Wars of Reaving, Clan Goliath Scorpion, who were later driven from the Homeworlds themselves, and the hollowed-out shell of Clan Coyote, as well as the still formidable clans Star Adder, Cloud Cobra, and Steel Viper, remained. The populations of the Homeworlds were decimated by deliberate bloodlettings, with whole populations, including civilians, being annihilated by various actors from all clans and organizations. Whole planets were even made unlivable or had been depopulated, ruining their industrial potential as well. And standing atop this ruin was Brett Andrews and the Steel Vipers, with their arsenal of frontline and second-line mechs, and from here they appeared more formidable than ever. They had removed the taint of the Inner Sphere just as promised. Victories against all of their ancient rivals emboldened them, such as against the Jade Falcons and Snow Ravens, as well as their new recent rival, the Diamond Sharks. And now, even the Society and Clan Coyote, the latter of which had been constricted and suffocated into submission after delivering a series of devastating hammer blows. From here, they had every intention of reforging the Homeworlds into a deadly weapon in order to pierce the foul heart of the Inner Sphere. Only there was one problem. Their friends and allies revealed yet one last remaining clan that bore the taint of the Inner Sphere, one that had to be removed. July 29th, 3075, is the day the Vipers received their comeuppance for all of their treachery, bigotry, and violence. It started in the very council chambers where Brett Andrews had revealed his intention to purify the clans. In the very council chambers where Brett Andrews had dishonorably killed Sakon Labov of Clan Diamond Shark. The Grand Council had met to discuss what changes they would implement across their newly won worlds, even if they were ruined. Andrews, due to the terror released by the Society in their use of viral weaponry, and the deceit they'd run behind the scenes for so long, demanded the entirety of the clan eugenics program be halted for a point of no less than 5 years. During this time, each clan would conduct a complete examination of each of its tendered legacies. Once legacies were verified as being untouched or uncontaminated, and this period had passed, the clans could restart the use of their iron wombs. The only problem? The clans had all been badly mauled, decimated by years of warfare across the whole of their territories. They needed warriors, if for no other reason than to keep the clan system moving after the traumatic shocks of the Wars of Reaving. This divided the coalition, and from there, the Star Adders, under Khan Cassius Nebuta, struck. Nebuta reminded the council of the Ilkhan's own words in 3071, regarding purity and the success of the clans. With the use of these words, he turned the entirety of the council against the Khan of Clan Steel Viper. If he wanted purity, then he could have it, and it'd start with the madman who destroyed their societies for his own gain. He issued a trial of Reaving against the Ilkhan. Of the remaining clans, only Bloodspirit opposed it, and not even because they had any common cause with the Vipers, but only due to their hatred of the Adders. Andrews declared a trial of refusal against the Reaving, and Nebuta accepted it for unaugmented combat. Andrews bid himself in the defense, and revealed once more a concealed weapon, this time a laser pistol, and he shot Khan Nebuta square in the face with it, killing him in an instant. This violated the Chamber's rules far more explicitly than the simple knife he'd killed Labov with some years ago, and it finally doomed Clan Steel Viper. It was Khan Halian Kardan who rose at this act of treason and gave a statement that every other Khan in the council, horrified as they were, would find agreement with. It is clear before us now that Clan Steel Viper and its leaders are more than just tainted. They are corrupt to the core. A simple Reaving will not do. The Cloud Cobras call for the annihilation of Clan Steel Viper. The Star Adder Sakon quickly seconded the motion, and others fell into line. The Ilkhan was stripped of his title and position, all while Andrew shouted and snarled about another trial of refusal. He was restrained by Sakon Benek in response, who then proceeded to beat him to death with a series of vicious blows using the ceremonial wooden mask of Clan Star Adder, literally breaking the former Ilkhan's face in. The lore master of Clan Steel Viper was killed in his own attempt to depart the system in the immediate aftermath. All of the clans had been weakened by the Wars of Reaving, but in relative power, the Steel Vipers were still amongst the strongest in the Kerensky cluster. However now, regardless of that fact, they were to suffer for the sins of their former leader. All of the remaining clans in the Homeworlds rallied their forces, and from there they descended upon the Steel Vipers. By October of 3075, the Vipers felt the wrath of what was to come. Cersei was struck first, with a huge battle emerging in space, before the conflict on the ground descended into pure carnage. First and second line forces were now fighting like cornered snakes, trying desperately to survive. The Vipers could not have defeated the Star Adders on their own, let alone the Star Adders being backed by the Goliath Scorpions, Blood Spirits, Coyotes, and the newly formed Stone Lions, as well as the Cobras. The defenders fought ferociously, but in the face of such firepower and odds, especially once orbital bombardments and aerospace bombing runs started hammering any attempt the Vipers made at a counterattack. The conclusion was already determined. Cersei fell, as Viper warriors, including those in their venerable Phoenix Hawk IICs, were simply overwhelmed by enemy forces, even as the Vipers attempted to use Desgra tactics simply to survive. The most brutalized and broken tried to surrender, only to be unceremoniously killed, delivering to the Vipers what they had given to so many others. The rest of their warriors, for all their moral failings in the lead up to this trial, this war, fought with the bravery of doomed but determined soldiers. They embodied still the vision that Mercer had for them so long ago. The recordings of Kerensky were always a clear lie, but Mercer herself saw her clan for the potential it had. A potential now that was quickly vanishing. From the very ruins of their enclaves on Cersei, the last remnants of the Vipers on World, the 38th Phalanx continued to hold on, until a unified clan assault literally hunted them down and destroyed the last remnants over 2 days of horrific fighting. The other last holdouts of resistance on World were headed by their new Sakan, the hastily elected George Mercer, who died earlier defending Cersei with his warriors on the other side of the planet. One final major engagement remained in the campaign following the fall of Cersei. That was to be the Battle for New Kent. This was truly the home for the Steel Vipers. Everything they were was now left to defend it. Every mech they'd stolen, traded for, and built that remained in service stood here. The great forerunner to so many other designs. The ahead-of-its-time assault mech from 2 centuries prior, the Phoenix Hawk IIC, was to be with its creators in their last stand. The mech that, by its exchange to Clan Diamond Shark, had literally saved the clan's military power and allowed it to rebuild, would be there against the darkness Clan Steel Viper itself had invited upon the Homeworlds. This time it would stand alongside vaunted Omnimex, and the best frontline forces the Vipers could bring to bear. There were no second or first-line machines. Not anymore. Only weapons with which to save the clan, and at all costs. The Phoenix Hawk IIC was also well placed for the battle that was to come. It could fight in melee combat effectively. It was fast and agile, meaning it could effectively exploit terrain in order to overtake their unified killers. If the Steel Vipers were to die with their mechs trying to cling onto life, those within the Phoenix Hawk IIC would die beautiful deaths. The Steel Vipers faced the McKenna's pride in their own system, as well as numerous other clan naval warship stars. This engagement in the heavens was a foregone conclusion, that conclusion being defeat for the Vipers. One by one, these last defenders of the clan fell silent in the night, after magnificent displays of light and fire stretched across the sky. The last Viper warship, Constrictor, attempted to find an escape route after the fleet had been utterly destroyed. It never found a way out. The Blood Spirits arrived on the surface first, and were quickly struck at before they even made landfall as planet defense batteries shredded the attackers. The Vipers managed to slay the Blood Spirits' Sakan and destroyed the 258th Crimson Guards cluster. The Stone Lions landed next, supporting the Blood Spirits, and under the leadership of Con Forrest Campbell, they silenced the ground batteries that had already taken their toll on the attackers. After the skies were clear, the Star Adders and Goliath Scorpions descended. Fighting was hard as the Scorpions moved to take the planet's primary drop port and dropship yards, intent on sealing the defenders on the surface of the planet to experience their fate. Skirmishes broke out across the pathway to New Kent City as well, the capital of the Steel Vipers on World, though any sign of resistance was bombed from above by the Cloud Cobras whenever they tried to stiffen their lines. Other suspected holdout positions were blasted by the Cobras as well, on the pathway to the city, as the Star Adders and their allies now pushed increasingly towards the capital. A few days later, the entirety of the capital was encircled, leaving only Alpha and Omega galaxies, as well as the new Khan's Keshik, trapped within. The clan coalition, under the command of now Ilkhan Banasek, were ordered to rest and resupply. From above, their warships, having driven the Viper fleet into extinction, now bombarded several Steel Viper enclaves and cities to ruin. There was no need for them to fight, and there was no consideration given to the civilians living there. This was a trial of annihilation against enemies that they had decided were not worthy of mercy. On the same day, the Mercer Building, a central icon to the Vipers in New Kent City, was strafed by Cloud Cobra and Star Adder aerospace assets until it caught fire and collapsed into the midst of the densely overbuilt city. On December 21st, in the twilight of 3075, one day after the clans unleashed hell from above, the assault on New Kent City began. The Vipers had prepared for their murderers well, though, not intending on going quietly into the night. Civilians had been armed, against clan traditions to be clear, as their fate was to die as well. Explosives were hidden around the city too, laying in ambush as much as the civilians were. These explosives were detonated as clan mechs or columns got too close. Around every corner, a Steel Viper mech or formation was prepared to strike, and after they landed their blows, they simply faded into the city as it turned increasingly into a ruin. These were all tactics the spheroids used. The Vipers knew them well, because the Vipers had fought against them. Faced with extinction, and with Brett Andrews being dead, the Vipers turned away from all of his ideology and acts of pure clan warfare, and were now trying to do all that they could to try to cling to life in the face of looming extinction. After only one day of fighting, Banasek withdrew the clan assault. The will to take more losses to take the city simply wasn't there. They had no need to fight and defeat these people anyway, only the need to annihilate them. On the 22nd, the McKenna's Pride itself entered a firing position above the city and began to devastate the capital. Hours of bombardments followed. No Viper, civilian or soldier tried to flee. It would be pointless regardless. The clan died in fire. Within the devastated and barren landscape of what had once been their capital, the clan found its final grave, and with it lay its warriors and legacies. Many of those warriors were buried or cremated within their Phoenix Hawk IICs and other mechs. But it was not the final fate of the Phoenix Hawk IIC to remain within the ashes of New Kent, buried with its Steel Viper creators. For away from the isolation of the clan Homeworlds, it was to rise like a phoenix within the inner sphere. The Phoenix Hawk IIC-6, first deployed in 3070, represents the final, known model of the mech to emerge at the time where it could have been produced in the clan Homeworlds, though there is no record of it being employed by clan Steel Viper. Beyond this, the mech saw construction within the Diamond Shark facilities on Twycross, at the Shark's Trellshire Heavy Industries complex. Upon its introduction, it was primarily fielded by clan Ghostbear and Diamond Shark. As far as the mech goes, though, the 6, notably, is a departure from other variants of the Phoenix Hawk IIC in its reconfiguration of its movement profile, and in its unique weapons configuration. First of all, it adds additional armor plating, going to 11.5 tons of clan ferro fibrous, giving it 220 points of armored protection. Next, it has 11 double heat sinks, letting it vent 22 points of heat per turn. The final major change comes with its core components, in the form of it using improved jump jets. This allows the mech to leap much further than traditional jump jets, but it also requires a huge investment of tonnage. It has 8 of these overall, allowing the mech to jump through the air up to 240 meters, or 8 movement points in the tabletop game. This is enormous for a mech of this size, and it allows it to bound as far as it can run every turn. But this impressive new functionality does come at a cost when it comes to firepower, and a heavy one at that. To start off its offensive capabilities, it has a targeting computer on board to help its limited arsenal deliver its payload accurately. After this, it has a pair of heavy-medium lasers, split between the right and left torsos. These are powerful for their weight, though they still represent a step back in terms of the mech's effective range, and in its overall ability to deliver significant damage on target. After this, it has a pair of plasma cannons, with 1 in each arm, as well as 20 rounds of fire per system. These can be used to overheat enemy mechs, or boil infantry and vehicle teams alive. They are frightening weapons against non-mech forces. Even against other battle mechs, though, they can make a major difference in limiting fire output of their targets turn on turn. These being in the arms, however, do limit the mech's ability to engage in melee, should it be wanting to use all of its offensive capacity in one place. This is a very specialized mech, favoring mobility and protection heavily over firepower. A radical departure from the original design, the Phoenix Hawk IIC-7 is the first variation of this venerable clan battle mech that makes major changes to almost every aspect of the 2C. First introduced in 3078 by Clan Diamond Shark, built exclusively at Trellshire Heavy Industries on Twycross, this innovative new take on the Phoenix Hawk truly needed to prove itself upon its introduction, given the scope of the change. To date, the 7 has the smallest engine of any Phoenix Hawk 2C, in this case a Clantech 320 XL power plant. It frees up a massive volume of weight, though of course this comes at the expense of the mech having an overall much lower maximum speed and walk rate. It moves at 64 km per hour as a result, but it saves 15 tons overall. On the heatsink side of things, it has its base volume, so it can cool 20 every turn. In terms of protection, it is very heavily guarded overall, with 14.5 tons of standard plating, guarding it with 232 armored pips. It can take more hits than its nimbler siblings, in other words. And it'll have to. Maybe. Because it does still have 6 improved jump jets, letting it leap up to 180 meters in a single bound. This means it can leap, once more, as far as it can run, and this can generate meaningful defensive bonuses, albeit at the cost of 12 tons overall for this jump capacity. With all of these changes, you'd expect to see major alterations in firepower, and you'd be absolutely correct to assume this. Firstly, it has 2 LB-10X autocannons, with 1 in each side torso, mirroring the Ultra autocannons of old. These allow the 2C in this variation to fire solid penetration rounds, or cluster ammunition, and they have excellent range. Strangely, it houses its ammunition in its arms, which could be problematic in a multitude of ways. Though, one can say that if the arm is destroyed in an ammunition explosion, at least it doesn't damage the mech's engine, due to the K-system the clan mechs have built into every chassis. So there is a hidden advantage to this very unique and unorthodox placement. It also has 40 rounds of ammunition overall. What comes next? Well, it has a pair of SRM-4 streaks, in the center torso no less, allowing it to crit fish beyond its LBX cluster rounds. And these missiles are also consistently accurate. It stores its streak ammunition in the mech's head, however. That is an interesting choice of placement for ammunition in this case. If its ammunition is hit, the odds of survival are very limited. But to look on the bright side, at least the mech has a Clantech K-system on board. I wonder if this applies to the head as well. Finally, it has 2 Clan ER medium lasers with 1 in each arm, for if the mech runs out of cannon or missile ammunition, and to provide it with extra firepower on turns where it does not jump. Overall, the 7 is a very impressive machine, with some choices that are eccentric. I hazard many pilots with a sense of self-preservation may avoid some of these more quirky choices. But these are, after all, intended for clan warriors, so realistically, these drawbacks might not even be taken into consideration.
Damnation seize my soul if I give you quarters, or take any from you. Edward Blackbeard Teach, November 22nd, prior to his final battle with the Royal Navy, the province of North Carolina, British Empire, 1718.
The Steel Vipers forged a true devil when they created the Phoenix Hawk IIC centuries prior to their destruction, much as the Star Adders had with the Warhammer 2C, or Clan Wolf had with the Marauder 2C. They never fully exploited these mechs to the fullest until long after they'd been created in the first place. For the Steel Vipers, their change of heart regarding the machine and even military tactics and strategies came too late to save them from the fate they'd crafted for themselves. But the Phoenix Hawk IIC did not die with them. No. Twycross, under a new clan, was now its home, not Arcadia, New Kent, or Babylon. And the Diamond Sharks, in the aftermath of the collapse of the Homeworlds and the permanent location to the Inner Sphere for exiled clans, continued their course of merchant domination. To put a friendlier spin on their operations within the Inner Sphere, which had become substantially more sophisticated and widespread by the turn of the century, the Diamond Sharks started to revert to their original clan name, that being Clan Sea Fox. But once a shark, always a shark, even with a softer outside demeanor being imposed upon it. They infiltrated supply chains and became major distributors across the Inner Sphere. Their mercantile trade network more or less controlled the distribution of limited levels of clan technologies to even spheroid buyers, with only a few exceptions. And this made them incredibly wealthy and powerful. Even by the 32nd century, they did restrict what mechs could be made available though. Advanced Omnimechs using cutting-edge technologies were almost always, at least for a time, restricted for distribution. This was of course to prevent the Sea Foxes from building up too much resentment from their clan peers, and of course to keep their own advantage over their clients. But there was an unforeseen consequence of this dominance. For realistically, you see, the dated machines the clans built well before Omnimechs, or other second-line machines that appeared afterwards, often fit their spheroid clients' wants better than the latest clan platforms. These mechs were designed without duels in mind. They were more often than not built for the real applications of war. Notably, Inner Sphere and Periphery pilots and military doctrines, even using the restricted and primitive configurations of clan battle mechs that were made available to them, exploited these machines in ways that clan warriors either never would or would never think to. Or they did so in ways that would be considered deeply dishonorable. Melee combat, combined fire, ambushes, and an assortment of other tactics were common among Spherefolk. In addition, the layout of their formations was more often about battlefield supremacy through volume of material, meaning these mechs could be employed in numbers, or could be shielded by numerous inferior assets in combat. In other words, mechs like the Warhammer 2C leading a company of battle line Inner Sphere mechs into a straight engagement was a real game changer, even against a clan star or binary. This combination was really a dangerous evolution of warfare. The Phoenix Hawk IIC opened this door for striker formations within spheroid forces now. This was the Star League's originally theorized assault striker. This meant that Inner Sphere forces, as in their recon and strike teams, could be led by a heavier recon asset, or be supported by one. The dream that never materialized for the SLDF, now, with clan technologies and in its full form, was available to the closest inheritors to the Star League's military legacy, the Great Houses. Only in battles like Tukayyid did the clans ever seem to truly use these mechs as they were intended. For the most part, in the clan dueling system, this forerunner of clan design would be pitched in quick-moving heavy battles against comparable mechs. A Phoenix Hawk IIC might face something slower, even dramatically slower, but in a duel this just is unlikely given the preferences of clan pilots. In recent eras, the Inner Sphere though, now unburdened by clan military traditions and culture, and having access to a variety of variations of the mech, even if the Sea Foxes tried some economic controls over them in terms of first-party repair components, the Phoenix Hawk IIC has broken free from its cage, and has gradually allowed them to perform the role it was always meant to. This has not only meant that Inner Sphere fast-striking forces, or even heavier forces wanting more agility in a single mech, have benefited greatly from it, it's also meant that it's been modified and changed in ways the clans themselves would have never thought to do. A remarkable event took place in the 3140s within the Rosselhig Dominion. On their outermost planets, bordering the Periphery, those being Thule and Damien, a new specter emerged. Raiders from beyond the borders of the Dominion struck like lightning against them, dropping from orbit using machines with speed and agility to hit targets. These forces then looted the local region, before heading to their dust-off sites for extraction. In these raids, when Rosselhig forces confronted the pirates, they were met by a horrifying, Periphery-born modification. Multiple Phoenix Hawk IICs had been heavily altered by these renegades, increasing their armor, and further adding in energy weaponry for better sustainability when fighting. But most terrifying of all, they were equipped with hatchets, greatly increasing their close quarters threat to the Ghost Bear defenders. In what was the most notable encounter, where the Dominion once more failed to stop these heavy, fast renegades, a Ghost Bear Nyx was caught out of position, having gone too close to their free birth opposition, and for their trouble saw their mech utterly destroyed with a hatchet being left buried directly in the frame. To the Dominion, these machines and their pilots were viewed as a scourge. To the Sea Foxes, upon hearing about these major adjustments to the battle mech, they saw opportunity. The news of the pirates' success with this brutal, crude upgrade of their captured clan hardware had reached the ears of the Inner Sphere clients across the entirety of the Great Houses, making an immediate impression on them, particularly in the Draconis Combine. With demand for such mechs pouring in, the Sea Foxes quickly adapted this unofficial design into a full-on, refined variation. By 3146, these mechs began flowing into every corner of the Inner Sphere, as well as into the inventories of mercenaries, and even some illicit operators at the fringes of the Periphery. Another opportunity had been discovered, another venture was then made, and a new revenue stream had formed in order for the Sea Foxes to begin extracting wealth from. And this truly embodies the story of the Phoenix Hawk IIC now, in the new age. Its virtues can be recognized by its own operators within the clans, but now it can be used by those who might put it to its most innovative use within the Inner Sphere, fulfilling a role much closer to what its precursor was intended for. Amusingly though, even if used and even shaped by Freebirth hands to their own advantage, inevitably it is the Sea Foxes who stand to gain the most. This mech is a part of their business, and with mechs like the Phoenix Hawk IIC leaving their factories for a variety of clients, business is good. The Phoenix Hawk IIC is their creature now, And that means it is every bit as ruthlessly controlled and distributed as the pirates who now prize it. Developed in 3086, the Phoenix Hawk IIC-8 is the most technologically sophisticated variation of the mech built to date. This marvel of engineering is not only extremely expensive to produce, but represents the pinnacle of what technology can do for the Phoenix Hawk IIC. The most advanced component on board is its impressive 17.5-ton 400XXL engine. This passively generates heat and takes up more critical space in comparison to a traditional Clantech XL engine. As a drawback, this does mean that it can be destroyed by the loss of a single side torso. Still, these power plants are extremely light for their performance, and this one delivers to the 2C8 exactly what it needs. In addition, the mech has 7 improved jump jets, letting it leap up to 210 meters in a single bound. This level of mobility in an 80-ton giant is fantastic, and comes with a huge price tag. In addition, it has 16 double heat sinks, letting it vent 32 thermal points per turn. To cover its defense, it has 14.5 tons of standard plating, giving it 232 points of protection. That is substantial for a mech of its weight, most definitely. Also, to guard it further from other threats, it has a clan ECM suite as well. So, what does it have for firepower? In the right and left torso, it has 4 clan small pulse lasers to start with. These are accurate, badly maul infantry, and can pick at armored targets. The real firepower, though, comes from its twin Clantech ERPPCs, with 1 in each side torso. These are head-capping weapons, hitting with the force of a Gauss rifle, and going just as far. Overall, the 2C8 is very impressive, though it can run hot, and it is extremely expensive to both produce and deploy. Still, it is a very capable machine, even with its shortcomings. I'm willing to bet that even the most hardline frontline warrior would not shirk from its use. Developed by pirates, and then replicated and sold by Clan Seafox in 3146, the Phoenix Hawk IIC-10 is, as of this moment, the final iteration of the battle mech currently in use by the armies of the Inner Sphere and clans. Its standard components are much the same to the base model of the Phoenix Hawk IIC regarding its engine, jump jets, and internal structure. It does have 11.5 tons of ferro fibers, however, slightly increasing its protection overall. When it comes to its cooling as well, it upgrades to 16 double heat sinks, letting it cool 32 per turn. So what makes this mech so different? It's mostly in the weaponry. To start with, it has a pair of clan ER large lasers, with 1 in the head and 1 in the center torso. These are strategically placed, that should it lose a side torso, it can continue to fire these primary systems regardless. These are excellent long-range systems that can do real damage when sniping from afar, or as the mech moves to close with targets. Next up, it has 6 Clan ER medium lasers, with 3 in each side torso. This battery of energy weaponry can lay on some heavy levels of damage in close, and they don't disrupt the mech's melee capabilities as they are not mounted in the arms. And that matters, because in the right arm, the 2C10 has, of course, a hatchet. This weapon can be a fatal blow to an enemy mech in close if it lands on their head, or it can even just sever a limb. When combined with its laser arsenal, this is a very effective weapon for dispatching lighter or even weakened heavier opponents. In total, the 2C10 is agile, it hits hard at its intended engagement distances, and it is well cooled enough to use either its long-range complement or its short-range complement as needed. It is balanced and brutal. And it also goes to show that pirates are more cunning than they are given credit for. And if I dare say, it also goes to show that being a pirate is alright with me. There is another holy bird, called the Phoenix, which I have never seen but in pictures. He rarely appears in Egypt, only once in every 500 years, so they say in Heliopolis, and he is supposed to come when his father dies. If the painter describes him truly, his plumage is part golden and part red, and he is very like an eagle in shape and size. They say that this bird comes from Arabia, bringing the body of his father embalmed in mirrah to the Temple of the Sun, and there he buries him. First, he molds an egg of myrrh. Then he puts his father in the middle of it. Lastly, he covers up the body with myrrh. This is what they say the bird does. But I do not believe them. Herodotus, Histories, Volume 2. Too early to be adopted en masse to change the face of warfare, and too late to be competitive against new designs. The Phoenix Hawk IIC is an oddity in many ways. It fits a role the clans themselves never really considered, but it was reflective in many of the early developments in the clan's mechs, where they were not truly duelist machines, as would come later due to clan martial culture, but instead were refined inner sphere-minded projects, using advanced technologies. Still, it was the precursor to many of the mechs that would replace it. Though it is unlikely to have inspired them directly, it represents the clan's shift towards combining mobility and weight, using the breakthrough technologies in mech construction to make this a reality. Its limited adoption in many ways was a tragedy, and in the hellish pit that was the Devil's Bath, the Phoenix Hawk IIC was proven to be the right mech for many of the struggles the clans faced during the invasion, and especially its creators, Clan Steel Viper. The Triumph did little to aid the usage in the clans or in the inner sphere as a whole. It took the humiliating routing of the Vipers by Clan Jade Falcon for it to truly be appreciated. And by then, of course, the Steel Vipers were on the path of self-destruction that had been all but solidified. Ironically enough, the Phoenix Hawk IIC helped pave this pathway. By trading this ancient design to the Diamond Sharks, the Vipers were given a lifeline and a means to rebuild their armies in order to oppress and destroy their fellow clanners, including the Diamond Sharks themselves. To further the irony, it was, alongside many other second-line mechs, finally adopted into frontline formations across the clans throughout the hellish fighting of the Wars of Reaving, as prejudices against non-Omnimechs slowly bled away. And this happened once the clans began to engage in what could only be described as true warfare. But in this costly devil's bargain with the Diamond Sharks, the very one that had turned into their own undoing in the Homeworlds, they had, in their own way, secured the legacy of Clan Steel Viper, allowing it to echo into the centuries to come. Because now the Phoenix Hawk IIC is truly appreciated for what it is, and what it was always meant to be. Through the Sharks, now the Sea Foxes, it has permeated the markets of the Inner Sphere. The original role it was envisioned to have had in the Star League, before it was even brought to fruition, has been achieved. These mechs can now be found in any battle of note. They can lead, or be the muscle, behind intense raids, or even be devastating flankers in major, heavy battles. Truly, the clans adopting new methods of warfare, and the spheroids embracing the mech to its fullest capabilities, has made it a deadly predator on any battlefield. It is in many ways the purest, true fast assault mech ever built. In its size, agility, and strength, perhaps this wonder of a battle mech reflected what its masters always truly wished to be. The Phoenix Hawk IIC's failed birth, its miserable short usefulness within the clans, before being left in functional torpor for centuries, has come to an end. In this rebirth, it has changed the nature of warfare, at least for those who have seen the potential in it, just as its originators had intended, albeit long after they expected it to. Once more ironically, the Steel Vipers needed to die, and the Phoenix Hawk had to help them in their own mad quest to finally allow for the new chapter in this mech's life. It is very much a part of their legacy, and it, in turn, cannot be separated from the events that saw its masters brought low. This inheritor to the Phoenix Hawk's lineage has risen from its resting place, and has shattered the broken husk of its masters in its revival, finally, like a brilliant new star being born in the night sky. It does not resemble the lowly serpent that made it a reality, and instead truly resembles that for which it was named. It has become the Phoenix, rising from the ashes of its broken creators, from the Star League to Clan Steel Viper, and taking its place among the great mechs that have changed warfare across human space. Our Ilkhan boldly proclaimed that all blood names and blood houses of the clans who currently resided in the inner sphere as tainted and worthless. An interesting turn of phrase. Who currently reside? Would it not be logical to conclude that any clan having contact with the inner sphere through its worlds and citizens, be they clan or spheroid in origin, be considered tainted? Look around us. Every clan who had contact in some manner with the inner sphere, homeworld or spheroid, is no longer present among us. They are abjured, annihilated, or absorbed. The Ice Hellions, their weakness proven. They are no longer here except through the body of the Scorpion. The horses, did we not just abjure them scant months ago? The obvious culprits as well. Sharks, falcons, bears, wolves, ravens. They are all no longer clan, according to this body. But stop for a moment and look back along our clan history. There is one clan still here in the presence of this body that has the taint clinging to it, as so defined so expertly by our Ilkhan, yet so deftly turned. My Khans, this clan is all that remains between us and our future. And, as our Ilkhan reminded us nearly 4 years ago, our success in retaking Terra relies on the purity of the clans. I therefore move that this Grand Council declare a trial of Reaving upon Clan Steel Viper. Clan Star Adder Khan Stanislav Nabuta. The Grand Council. 29th of June, 3075. Oh boy, that was a lot of work. I hope people enjoyed the video. I also would like to give a huge shout out to all of the channel members. If you are a channel member to this channel, I literally could not do this without you guys, so thank you. It is incredible to make content for you guys on YouTube and to do other things like stream, as well as to potentially look into making videos across a broader range of subjects, though that wouldn't be for quite a long time, I suspect. If you enjoyed this piece, I also would recommend hitting like and hyping it if it's in the first week, just because it's very helpful for getting the video out there. Also share this video with your friends. YouTube does not always do the best job doing that. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And finally, commenting also helps a great deal as well, and I like to know what you guys think, especially after pouring an enormous amount of time into making such a big project as this. For this stage of the video, I would also like to apologize for my rather disheveled and chubby appearance being on camera, but I partially am doing this now in order for filters to not pick up that I am some type of bot when I am expressly not. I'm trying to read through a half-prepared sentence here. So it's half-prepared in front of me, so if you see my eyes darting from side to side, I'm just trying to gather my resources here in order for everyone to know what I'm talking about. First of all, we had some guest voices on here, most of which was from Nate from Battletech. Nate is a huge Steel Viper fan, and so it felt appropriate to ask Nate to do most of the Steel Viper voices in the video. I also asked Tex to do a cheeky line as Blackbeard, just because I can't imagine anyone else doing Blackbeard's voice but Tex. Huge thank you to both of them, Nate and Tex. I sincerely appreciate it. Thank you for being a part of the project. Marco Mazzoni is the artist who did the 2 pieces of the Phoenix Hawk IIC in the snow. I think they looked spectacular, so a huge, big thank you to Marco Mazzoni. Eldonius Rex did 3 art pieces for this particular video, including the Phoenix Hawk IIC in the hangar, the Phoenix Hawk IIC on Tukayyid, and the Phoenix Hawk IIC in like the Ghibli-style, wonderfully bright beach scene. And I should also mention that he has a web store where he does sell prints. I recommend checking it out. It will be in the top pinned comment. There might even be some prints from this particular video there. I also want to give a huge shout out to all of the people who helped me take gameplay footage. Yeah, it is incredibly difficult, of course, to do all of this on your own entirely. It is just when I ask people if they want to hang out, play some video games, and let me set up battles for these things. So huge shout out and a huge thank you to everybody who participated on stream, helping me take the gameplay footage to fill in some of the areas in the video. I just want to point out that I am in no way sponsored by anyone affiliated with Battletech in any meaningful way, but there is a plastic Phoenix Hawk IIC miniature. I'm just going to mention that this bad boy exists in plastic. I think it's one of the better plastic miniatures to come out of the Mercenaries Kickstarter. That can be found in the Clan Direct Fire Star pack by Catalyst Game Labs. It's a great pack in general. I think it's got like the Grizzly and I think the Bane in it as well. Really cool, super cool mech. I really do recommend people check it out and consider it if you want a plastic Phoenix Hawk IIC. These videos take months to produce when they're at this scale, just as a quick heads up. Like this particular video took me 2 months to make after pre-production, because there's certain things you do while working on other things. So, like I was arranging for like art, and I was arranging for like some of the stuff I was going to tackle in this video. That took an enormous amount of time to do. So if you're wondering why it took over a month for this to come out after the previous video, it's just because it's a really huge project. Tons of research, tons of writing, tons of editing, tons of fact checking. I'm of course imperfect, so you might find that there are issues occasionally in these videos. They are not meant to be perfect. I do my best. It's a one-man operation. And as a quick aside, I forgot to mention when I first recorded this, the Steel Viper part of this video is much longer than you might otherwise suspect. Like, you can feel that the Phoenix Hawk IIC plays a role in this as well as the Steel Vipers. Why did I focus so much on Clan Steel Viper, you may ask? I'm unlikely to ever cover another Steel Viper mech, especially not one that I consider a major battle mech. So it just felt right, if this was a hybrid video, very similar to the Stone Rhino video, to really go over their story. The one part of the story that has the least to do with the Phoenix Hawk IIC is the Wars of Reaving segment, but it just felt like I had to do that, especially after talking about the Steel Vipers and their development. It felt criminal to not go over their final fate, which is what I did in this video as well. So just if you're wondering, why was all that in there? It's in there because they made the Phoenix Hawk IIC, and I wanted to go over their final fate, because I'm unlikely to in any other video anytime soon. And as a quick aside, all of the resources I used to make this video will be found in the top pinned comment, along with a link to like Eldon and things like that, where you can check out all of the resources I use to make this for yourselves. I think that you can get the best view of Battletech by viewing it from your own perspective, because you have to remember this is all filtered through me and my reading and understanding of these things. So if you want to get a complete view of the Battletech setting, you can't get it through me. You can only get it through the books themselves, and so those will all be pinned in the top pinned comment as well. You've got to remember, this is my opinion and commentary. It's not the same thing as an official resource. The official resources are where you want to go. But yeah, just an enormous amount of work. 2 months finally out the door. I really do hope people enjoyed the Phoenix Hawk IIC. The next video I've got coming up is I'm likely to do a book review or two, at least one, maybe two. And there is a video coming that was sponsored by the channel members that is about the Locust. And oh boy, will that be fun. I'm hoping I can get the Locust video out for you guys by the end of March or the beginning of April. So, thank you everyone for joining me here once more. I will catch you all in the comment section below as per usual. Don't forget to hit like, don't forget to subscribe, and again, thank you to all of the YouTube channel members. I really do appreciate it. I hope you all enjoyed.